limitation is that an important question is this very specific to COVID? So we did look at subjects that got pneumonia in this time who were not in this sample, and they did not show these sort of changes. But we can't rule out that some of this is just the impact of getting a very serious disease.
What should people actually have as a takeaway from your findings?
I would say the main takeaway is that COVID is affecting lots of different parts of your body, not just the lungs, but also the brain. So it's a serious disease. I think the actual takeaway for any one individual are kind of limited in a way because we knew already that COVID is bad. I think this is most important for scientists who are trying to understand the precise impacts that COVID is having on our body.
Tom Nichols is a professor of neuroimaging statistics at the University of Oxford. Tom Nichols, thanks so much.
Thank you.
I Love Lucy made Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz instant stars when it first aired, but the show also took a toll on their relationship. That's the topic of a new Amazon documentary called Lucy and Desi. Later today on All Things Considered, a conversation with the couple's daughter, Lucy, about the film and how there's renewed interest in her parents' lives. Tune in by telling your smart speaker to play NPR or your member station by name. And now, it's time for sports. It took a while, but baseball is back. A massive trade shakes up the NFL, and a huge record broken last night in the NBA. Joining us now is Howard Bryant from Meadowlark Media. Good morning, Howard.
David, how are you?
Great. Great now. I mean, after 99 days, MLB's lockout came to an end on Thursday. For a while, it looked like there was going to be no end in sight. What can you tell us about the deal between the league and baseball's players?
Well, I think for the things that fans care about, which is what the game is actually going to look like on the field, I think some of the you're finally not going to be playing under 4 different sets of rules anymore, which we've been doing for the last several years. Obviously, the designated hitter is no more in the National League. It had survived for 150 years without it. The American League had had it since 1973, and now both teams, your pitchers are no longer hitting, which is music to the ears of some fans and a loss of strategy for others. And I think that's probably one of the biggest things on the field. Also, there's a discussion to legislate shifts where you're going to essentially have a legal defense in baseball, but that's not until next season. Normally, baseball fans would say, hey, hit the other way. There's nobody standing over there. But It has changed how people watch the game. You're going up to 12 teams in the playoffs, up from 10. And that's a big deal considering that this is not the NBA. This is not the National Hockey League where virtually
everybody
half
wins.
The league makes the playoffs.
Right.
And so it really does make you wonder what the value of a 162-game season is going to be when so many teams make the playoffs. So that's going to switch the balance as well. The last couple of years where we've seen 7-inning doubleheaders, that is no more. And so is say goodbye to the short-lived invisible man on second base and extra innings. So if you really, really crave those 15, 18-inning marathon games, they're back. But all in all, it's good that the sport is coming back, and these two sides had to show some diplomacy to get this game back on the field.
A lot of shifts in how players will be assigned on the field. Speaking of shifts, there's some big news in the NFL this week as well. Tell us about those.
I mean, only if you think that Aaron Rodgers getting a $200 million contract is big news. Absolutely. It was very unclear whether or not Aaron Rodgers was, what was he going to do? Was he going to retire? Was he going to move? So the Packers said, how about $50 million a year to still be our quarterback? And also the great Super Bowl champion Russell Wilson over in Seattle, traded to the Denver Broncos. These are big deals in football because anyone who watches that sport, which is everyone since it's the America's religion, you need your quarterback. And so Russell Wilson leaving, end of an era for the Legion of Boom already, and now coming into Denver, that is a big deal for all the football fans out there in the Pacific Northwest and also over in Denver.
Little more than a minute left. I want to touch on 2 quick things in the NBA. First, San Antonio Spurs coach Greg Popovich broke an all-time record. How big is his legacy in becoming the leader in wins for coaches?
Well, it's a big deal because Greg Popovich is one of the best coaches to ever do this, and 1,335 wins is a staggering number. Five NBA titles, gonna go down, as one of the greatest. And I think what we love about Pop as well is that his style of play. You know, a Greg Popovich team, they pass the ball. I always refer to it as basketball for grown-ups. Good for him. It's been great to see. Also, if you're an old ABA fan, to have an ABA
right, all in San Antonio, right?
In San Antonio, absolutely.
All right. So in 30 seconds we have left. Last month of the NBA season, how things shaping up?
Well, you don't want to play the Brooklyn Nets at full speed because you just can't tell. When you got Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, they're great. Watch out for the Boston Celtics. All bets are off in the West. A lot of great teams over there. And will LeBron actually make the playoffs this year? That hasn't happened in a very, very long time.
That's Meadowlark Media's Howard Bryant. Howard, thanks.
My pleasure, David. Thank you.
Where does the color blue come from? That question struck Nana Aqua Brew Hammond one day while she was reading.
I was actually reading the Bible. I was reading about the temple furnishings in King Solomon's temple. And I just remember pausing when it noted that there were some drapes in the temple that were blue. And I was wondering why that was significant.
So she started doing some research and learned an interesting tidbit that secretions from a species of snail can make a brilliant blue.
And this was used to dye, the temple drapes and also like textiles of that time. And it was very expensive because a snail produced only one drop. So I was like, whoa, kids need to know about this.
So what did Nana Aqua Brew Hammond do? She wrote a kid's book. It's titled Blue. It's about lapis lazuli, rocks mined in Afghanistan, turned into jewelry or crushed to make eyeshadow, about the indigo plant, soaked in water and used to dye fabric. For our children's book series Picture This, we spoke with Brew Hammond and illustrator Daniel Minter about blue.
Most of my work, I use the color blue. It's my go-to color, a deep, deep blue. And a lot of the people in my paintings have tones of blue within the skin. And I use that to show the depth of color within our skin and that beautiful blue that goes straight all the way to black and also has bits of red. It also has bits of green, and it's a complex color.
Daniel Minter illustrated blue with acrylic paint and, yes, a lot of different blues.
I can take one blue, say a ultramarine blue, and give that a thin wash, and you get a light blue. But as I put on layer on layer on top of that, it gets deeper and deeper and darker. And then I begin to introduce other colors, like a little bit of a magenta to pull the colors out of it. So counting the colors of blue is difficult because there's light blue, darker blue, and then there's, the indigo. And I use the indigo sparingly because it can get so deep so quickly. And so I used the indigo as my last layer of color.
Brew Hammond writes this, quote, "Perhaps because blue was the color of the heavens, yet so rare and hard to create on Earth, people around the world considered the color holy." On the page are Minter's illustrations of hands reaching, stretching toward the sun, hovered over a bowl of blue powder, cradling a snail shell.
I'll talk more about the way the book was written, which I thought was really interesting, and that it had no characters. The only character that is consistent is the blue. The other thing that I saw as going through this is the human interaction with the color blue. So I began with the hands, it's the hands, with the kids reaching up to the sky to grab the blue, to reach the blue, and the other hands holding the water to catch the blue, to dip the blue from the ocean, and other hands with the woman singing the blues, stretching out her hand, reaching out, and then other hands, making medicine from the indigo plants. So if you look through the book, it's all about the human interaction with this color, with the materials that create this color.
That's so interesting when you were saying that, Daniel. I was thinking to myself, I wasn't necessarily, it wasn't a conscious decision to not have a character. I was just so enamored with what I was learning that I wanted kids to walk away from this book with the wonder that I was feeling about the color itself. And so that was really what motivated the writing. But I think that I'm so glad that that was the process. You know, even just listening to you just explain how you interpreted it, I think that it's a good thing that like we were each able to kind of work in our silos.
One of the ways that I work is I do not want to talk to the author about the book because I want to trust the text. I try to give an interpretation of what is there, but I also wish to insert some of myself in there. I often wondered when I was a child, how can I get up to the sky? How can I get up there and touch it? My father would always tell me that you can't touch the sky. And I said, yes, why not? Because it's there. I see it, it's up there. If I can get up there high enough, of course I can touch it, so those kinds of things, visions come directly from my childhood.
Yeah, as I was reading up on the history, I started to understand that, of course, it was about the color and the fact that people, had that wonder, like, we want to kind of capture the sky, we want to capture the sea. But it then became about, wealth and power, elitism and royalty. It also became about suffering and pain and brutality, from the slave trade within Africa to the slave trade in America. So it is more than a feeling. There's so many ideas attached to it. Even the genre, the blues, you hear people say things like, oh, true blue. There were because blue was such a hot commodity, there were people who were peddling fake blues. So just kind of tracing those things back to some of these histories was really interesting and profound to me. They didn't just come out of nowhere. They're anchored in some historic realities that we're living with that we don't even realize. On some levels, it's unfathomable. It's like you want to just go deeper and deeper and deeper.
That was author Nana Akua Brew Hammond and illustrator Daniel Minter talking about their children's book, Blue. This is Weekend Edition from NPR News. I'm David Folkenflik.
Support for NPR comes from WNYC members and from Capital One, offering Capital One Shopping, a downloadable browser extension that searches various sites for shoppers. What's in your wallet? More at CapitalOneShopping.com. And Indeed, a hiring platform with tools to help businesses attract, screen, and interview candidates they need to fill all of their job openings. More at Indeed.com/NPR.
This is WNYC New York. I'm David First. The New Yorker Radio Hour is coming up next on 93.9 FM. Today, director Jane Campion discusses her film, The Power of the Dog, which is nominated for 12 Oscars. And a historian describes how the invasion of Ukraine is part of a much longer pattern of Russian aggression. That's followed by Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me coming up at 11. Or you can join us for another hour of Weekend Edition. That's next on AM 820. To increase the variety of voices and news sources you hear on WNYC, we are expanding the number of BBC top-of-the-hour newscasts heard throughout the day. Stay with us for continuing updates on the war in Ukraine and in-depth coverage on Weekend Edition and from the BBC and NPR starting at 4 o'clock this afternoon here on WNYC. 44 degrees, rain and fog shifting to snow by early afternoon. There is a wind advisory in effect that starts at 11 o'clock this morning, going to early tomorrow morning with gusts up to 50 miles per hour expected during that time. So yes, rain this morning mixing with sleet and then shifting to snow this afternoon. We could see up to 2 inches in the city. It's 10 o'clock.
WNYC is supported by Focus Features, presenting Belfast, from writer-director Kenneth Branagh. In Belfast, 1969, where there was love, there was hope. Awards eligible. Now in theaters and on demand.
This is WNYC FM, HD and AM, New York.
Today on the New Yorker Radio Hour, I'll talk with director Jane Campion, one of the true originals in filmmaking today. Her movie, The Power of the Dog, is a Western, although not exactly a Western.
It is a very romantic genre that all of us, everybody, me included, have fantasies about.
It's based on a novel by the late writer Thomas Savage.
You know, here I had someone who really did grow up in the West, who was irritated by the romance of the West and found it to be not showing the best of men sometimes, but the worst of them.
Jane Campion's Power of the Dog. It's up for no less than 12 Academy Awards this month. I'll also talk with the historian Stephen Kotkin, whose work on the Soviet Union and its aftermath is crucial in understanding the Russian assault in Ukraine. That's all ahead today on the New Yorker Radio Hour, right after this.
Hello, this is Julie Candler with the BBC News. Intense fighting is continuing on the outskirts of the Ukrainian capital Kyiv, with shelling by Russian forces and outgoing fire by its defenders. Ukrainian commanders are concerned that Russians may be preparing to launch a large-scale assault on the city, as well as trying to encircle it. James Waterhouse, who's in Kyiv, says President Putin's plans for the Ukrainian capital aren't clear.
There is speculation. Would Vladimir Putin really want to bombard this city? It is, of course, already happening in residential areas on the outskirts. We've had the sound, sort of the cocktail of sounds of roadworks in the middle of the city as council workers get to work, against the backdrop of continuous rumblings of explosions in the northwestern area where there is the most intense fighting. Of course, Vladimir Putin, whether he wants to put in a puppet government or whatever happens should Ukraine fall, and of course, you know, Ukraine is putting up staunch resistance on that front. It doesn't quite make sense what is planned for the capital.
Ukraine says Russian troops have captured the eastern outskirts of Mariupol. The besieged city in the southeast has been one of the invaders' main targets, and its residents have endured days of shelling. The situation there has been described as catastrophic. Augustin Augier speaks for the charity Médecins Sans Frontières, or Doctors Without Borders, which is based in Lviv.
We had a testimony yesterday just saying that the situation is very bad. There are dire needs of everything. They have no electricity, no food, no water. And one of the main concerns is that the bombing and the fightings are becoming harder by the day, and they have more and more wounded with less and less medicine and overall medical supplies to treat the wounded people.
Hundreds of Ukrainians have demonstrated in the southern city of Melitopol after the Russian forces who occupy their city abducted their mayor. Video showed the crowd chanting, "Give us back our mayor." Ivan Fedorov was taken from his office on Friday with a bag over his head after refusing to cooperate with occupying forces. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has called for help from international leaders.
Our demand is simple. He should be released immediately. We appeal to all world leaders who talk to Moscow. I mean France, Germany, Israel and others. I personally have already called the German Chancellor and French President Macron. I will talk to everyone who can help release him.
France and Germany have again urged Russia to start an immediate ceasefire in Ukraine. The leaders of the two countries made the call during a phone conversation with President Putin, which lasted more than an hour. They also told him a diplomatic solution had to be found to the conflict. The two made a similar appeal when they spoke to the Russian leader on Thursday. World News from the BBC.
This is WNYC in New York. I'm David First. A $4.4 million city fund meant to help victims of the deadly fire in the Bronx in January has only doled out a fraction of that money. Mayor Adams' office confirmed $270,000 have been distributed. Households got checks of just over $2,000 from the mayor's fund. They also got around $5,000 from money raised by the Gambian Youth Organization. The delay has infuriated tenants who lost their homes, like Dana Campbell, a mother of 6 who is still living in a hotel with other displaced tenants.
I don't understand why you raise this money and then decide, well, you know, father has to decide when you get it and how you get it. And you don't know, you're not even talking to us to find out what our needs are.
The city says it didn't want to give the money out in lump sums and planned to spread it out over time. A group of 15 New York State senators is calling on Governor Hochul to halt her Midtown redevelopment plans, which include building 10 skyscrapers around Penn Station. The project also calls for 8 acres of open space, as well as a new concourse and new entrances to Penn. Senator Brad Hoylman signed on to the letter. He says the state hasn't explained how it will fund the project or how much taxpayers could have to pay if developers fall short of their share.
There are more questions than answers at this point. And before we proceed with one of the largest real estate projects in New York City's history, we need to have greater transparency.
I'm Jacqueline Sincata.
The Empire State Development Corporation is the agency in charge of the project. A spokesperson says talks over financing are still ongoing. Quick look at the weather. 44 degrees right now. Rain this morning is expected to shift to mix with sleet and then shift to snow this afternoon. Could see up to 2 inches of snow in New York City. Could be more like 2 to 5 north and west of the city.
This is the New Yorker Radio Hour, a co-production of WNYC Studios and The New Yorker.
Welcome to the New Yorker Radio Hour. I'm David Remnick. It's impossible to understand the destruction and slaughter that Vladimir Putin is unleashing in Ukraine without understanding his most basic conviction, that the breakup of the Soviet Empire was a catastrophe that Russia has yet to recover from. No one I know understands this history more intimately than Stephen Kotkin. Kotkin is a professor of history and international affairs at Princeton University, and he's a research scholar at the Hoover Institution at Stanford. He's written 2 volumes so far on the life of Stalin, with one more to come, as well as books on the Soviet Union in its last years. We've been hearing from voices both from the past and the present telling us that the reason for what has happened is, as George Kennan said, the great blunder of eastward expansion of NATO. A modern realist historian like John Mearsheimer tells us that a great deal of the blame for what we're witnessing now must go to the United States. So I thought we'd begin by your analysis of that argument.
I have only the greatest respect for George Kennan, whom I knew. John Mearsheimer is a giant of a scholar, but I respectfully disagree. The problem with their argument is that it assumes that had NATO not expanded, Russia wouldn't be exactly the same, or very likely close to what it is today. What we have today in Russia is not some kind of deviation from a historical pattern. Way before NATO existed in the 19th century, Russia looked like this. It had an autocrat, it had repression, it had militarism, it had suspicion of foreigners in the West. This is a Russia we know. And it's not a Russia that arrived yesterday or arrived in the 1990s. It's not a response to actions of the West. There are internal processes in Russia that account for where we are today. I would even go farther. I would say that NATO expansion has put us in a better place to deal with this historical pattern in Russia that we're seeing again today. George Kennan was the greatest Russia expert who ever lived. But I just don't think blaming the West is the right analysis for where we are today.
When you talk about the internal dynamics of Russia historically, it reminds me of a piece that you wrote and was published in Foreign Affairs 6 years ago, and it began like this. For half a millennium, Russian foreign policy has been characterized by soaring ambitions that have exceeded the country's capabilities. Beginning with the reign of Ivan the Terrible in the 16th century, Russia managed to expand at an average rate of 50 square miles per day for hundreds of years, eventually covering 1/6 of the Earth's landmass. And you go on to describe 3 fleeting moments of remarkable Russian ascendancy during Peter the Great, and then Alexander I's victory over Napoleon, and then, of course, Stalin's victory over Adolf Hitler. And then say these high watermarks aside, Russia has almost always been a relatively weak great power. So if you could expand on that and talk about how the internal dynamics of Russia have gone on to describe it both historically and in the present day under Putin. That would be, I think, very helpful.
So with Russia, what you've got is a remarkable civilization. You know it. You know it in the arts, in music, in literature, in dance, in film, in science. It's just a deep, profound, remarkable place, a whole civilization more than just a country. Its problem has always been not that sense of self, not that sense of identity, but the fact that it's in a struggle to live up to this aspiration that it has for itself, which it can't because the West has always been more powerful. Russia's a great power, but not the great power, except for those few moments in history that you just enumerated. And so in trying to match the West, or at least manage the differential between Russia and the West, they resort to coercion. They use a very heavy state-centric approach to try to beat the country forward and upwards. And that works for a time ostensibly. Very superficially it works. And Russia has a spurt of economic growth, and it builds up its military. And then, of course, it hits a wall. It then has a long period of stagnation where the problem gets worse. The worst part of this dynamic in Russian history is the conflation of the Russian state with some personal ruler. So instead of getting the strong state that they want to manage the Gulf with the West, they instead get a personalist regime. They get a dictatorship, which usually becomes a despotism. So Putin is what he is. He's ruling in Russia, and he's got these circumstances, almost a syndrome where geopolitics is trying to make up for a power differential that it can't make up for.
Well, let's describe Putin and Putinism. What kind of regime is it? It's not exactly the same as Stalinism. It's certainly not the same as Xi Jinping or the regime in Iran. What are its special characteristics, and why would those special characteristics lead it to want to invade, or why would Putin want to invade Ukraine, which seems, at least from this distance, singularly stupid?
Yes, well, war usually is a miscalculation. It's based upon assumptions that don't pan out, things that you believe to be true or wanted to be true. But let's back up for a second. So, of course, this isn't the same regime as Stalin. Of course, there's been tremendous change. The shock is that so much has changed, and yet we're seeing this pattern that they can't really escape from, where you have an autocrat or even now a despot making decisions completely by himself. Does he get input from others? Perhaps. Do they bring him information he doesn't want to hear? That seems unlikely. Does he think he knows better than everybody else? That seems highly likely. So he believed, it seems, that Ukraine was not a real country. He believed that the Ukrainian people were not a real people, that they were one people with the Russians. He believed that the Ukrainian government was a pushover. He believed what he was likely told or wanted to believe about his own military, that it had been modernized to the point where it could organize not a military invasion, but a lightning coup to take Kiev in 1, 2, 4, 5 days and either install a puppet government or force the current government and president to sign some paperwork. One other example we might allude to is what happened in Afghanistan in 1979. Very, very similar situation in some ways. The Soviet Union did not invade Afghanistan. It did a coup in Afghanistan. It sent special forces into the capital of Kabul. It murdered the Afghan leadership, and it installed a puppet, Babrak Karmal. But of course, they decided they might need some security in Afghanistan for the new regime. And so they sent in all sorts of regiments, army regiments, to provide security. And they ended up with an insurgency against their rule, and they ended up with a 10-year war that they lost. And so we have here the assumption that it could be a successful version of that, and it wasn't. And it turned out the Ukrainian people are brave and they're willing to resist and die for their country. And it turned out that the television president, Zelensky, who had a 25% approval rating before the war, which was fully deserved because he couldn't govern, now he has a 91% approval rating. But the biggest surprise, of course, was the West. All the nonsense about how the West is decadent, the West is over, the West is in decline, it's a multipolar world, the rise of China, et cetera, all of that turned out to be bunk. The courage of the Ukrainian people and the bravery and smarts of the Ukrainian government and its president Zelensky galvanized the West to remember who it was.
Let's discuss the nature of the regime, because it seems to me that the Putin regime changed somewhat. What actually is the nature of the regime and the people who are loyal to it and the people who are important in it?
So it's a military police dictatorship. It, in addition, has a brilliant coterie of people who run macroeconomics. And so, for example, your central bank, your finance ministry are all on the highest professional level. And that's why Russia had this fortress, this macroeconomic fortress, these foreign currency reserves, the rainy day fund, reasonable inflation. For the macroeconomic stability, for the economic growth, you sort of need decent relations with the West. But for the military security part of the regime, which is the dominant part, the West is your enemy. The West is trying to undermine you. It's trying to overthrow your regime in some type of so-called color revolution. And so what happens, the balance of those groups shifted more in favor of the military security, let's call it the thuggish part of the regime. And of course, that's where Putin himself comes from. And so the regime became more and more corrupt, less and less sophisticated, less and less trustworthy, less and less popular. It hollowed out. But that's what happens with dictatorships. Once again, they hollow themselves out.
But such a regime, it seems to me, would care above all about wealth, about the high life, about power. Why would they care about Ukraine?
It's not clear that they do. We're talking about one person here. So this is the thing about authoritarian regimes. They're terrible at everything. They can't feed their people. They can't provide security for their people. They can't educate their people. But they only have to be good at one thing to survive: the suppression of alternatives. If they can force all opposition into exile or prison, they can survive no matter how incompetent, no matter how corrupt, no matter how terrible they are. If money just gushes out of the ground in the form of hydrocarbons or diamonds or other minerals, the oppressors can emancipate themselves from the oppressed. The oppressors can say, we don't need you. We don't need your taxes. We don't need you to vote. We don't rely on you for anything because we have oil and gas, palladium and titanium, and fill in the blank, all the minerals that they have that they extract, which is all just cash flow.
Now, the West has decided, for obvious reasons, not only not to go to war with Russia, but not to have a no-fly zone for all the reasons we know. And the greatest exertion it showed is in economic sanctions, which in fact have proved to be more comprehensive and more powerful than maybe people had anticipated some weeks ago. But in the scheme that you're sketching out, it seems to me that at least for a good while, the people these are most aimed at will be able to absorb sanctions. Or do you think I'm wrong?
So yes, the financial sanctions are very impressive, but they'll take a while to affect the calculus of those people around Putin and Putin himself. The biggest sanctions and the most important sanctions are always technology transfer, right? It's always starving them of the high tech. So if you deny them over time through the Commerce Department, American-made software and American-made equipment and products, you can hurt this regime and create a technology desert. And the Chinese cannot come in and substitute because they need that same technology that we're denying to the Russians.
Yeah, but
and
in the meantime, as we saw in Grozny in 99-2000, as we saw in Aleppo, Russia is perfectly willing, if precision doesn't work, they're perfectly happy to use decimation. And that is what we're seeing in Kharkiv. We've seen it in other parts of Ukraine. And to my mind, it's only just begun, potentially.
Russia has a lot of weapons that they haven't used yet. But there are a couple of factors here. First of all, Ukraine is winning this war only on Twitter. On the battlefield, they're not winning this war. Russia is advancing very well. What's failed was the attempt to take Kiev in a lightning advance. But otherwise, their war is unfolding well. Moreover, the largest and most important consideration is that Russia cannot successfully occupy Ukraine. They do not have the scale of forces, they do not have the number of administrators, and they do not have the cooperation of the population. They don't even have a Quisling yet. You know, we're waiting for Viktor Yanukovych to reappear. Viktor Yanukovych was the duly elected president in 2010 in free and fair elections, who was unbelievably corrupt and was chased out of power by protests, and he fled to Russia, and Yanukovych is still in Russia. But let's think about him. He's a psychologically unimpressive character. He was incompetent. Could he actually have the willpower? Would he even agree to run Ukraine on behalf of Russia? And if not him, who else? And moreover, think about all those Ukrainians who would continue to resist. And if you're an administrator or a military officer in occupied Ukraine and you order a cup of tea, you're going to drink that cup of tea? You want to turn the ignition on in your car? You're going to turn that ignition on? You're going to turn the light switch on in your office? And all it takes is a handful of them being assassinated to unsettle the whole occupation.
Finally, you've been very quick to give credit where credit is due to the Biden administration for reading out its intelligence about the coming invasion, for sanctions, and for a kind of mature response to what's happening. What, if anything, have they gotten wrong in this?
They've done much better than we anticipated based upon what we saw in Afghanistan withdrawal, in the AUKUS rollout, the rollout of the deal to sell nuclear submarines to the Australians, but they've learned from their mistakes. That's the thing about the United States and the West. We have corrective mechanisms. We have a political system that punishes mistakes. We have strong institutions. We have powerful and free media. And so administrations that perform badly can learn and get better, which is not the case in Russia. And it's an advantage we can't forget. The problem now, David, is not that the Biden administration made mistakes. It's that it's really hard to figure out how to de-escalate. We keep raising the stakes with more and more sanctions and cancellations because that's where the pressure is on our side to, quote, do something, because the Ukrainians are dying on television every day. But the more you corner, the more there's nothing to lose for Putin, the more he can raise the stakes. We need a de-escalation from the maximalist spiral, and we need a little bit of luck and fortune here, perhaps in Moscow, perhaps in Helsinki or Jerusalem, perhaps in Beijing, but certainly in Kiev.
Steve Kotkin, I'm very grateful to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Stephen Kotkin is a professor of history and international affairs at Princeton University. This was an edited version of my conversation with him, and you can read much more and also watch the video at NewYorker.com. And for more context on the invasion of Ukraine, You might want to hear my conversation with reporters Masha Gessen and Joshua Yaffa, who shed light on everything that they've seen on the ground. That's on a recent episode of our podcast. This is the New Yorker Radio Hour. More to come.
The New Yorker Radio Hour is supported by Indeed with Instant Match, a hiring tool instantly delivering to businesses a list of candidates whose resumes on Indeed match the job description. Learn more at Indeed.com/credit. And by Progressive Insurance. Listeners can protect everything under one roof by bundling home and auto. More at Progressive.com or 1-800-PROGRESSIVE.
On the next Radio Lab, how far can you push the human body before it breaks?
I was starting to have nightmares, but I was awake.
People seeing secret code in the cracks of the road. Riders jumping off their bikes to square off and fight mailboxes.
We'll bring you the story of one race.
It's a race that is designed to reveal what human limits are.
That's on the next Radio Lab. Today at noon on 93.9 FM and AM 820 WNYC.
WNYC supporters include Audible Theater, presenting the Public Theater's production of Coal Country, featuring live music from Steve Earle, from Jessica Blank and Eric Jensen, now on stage at the Cherry Lane Theater. Tickets at coalcountrymusical.com. Carnegie Hall, which presents the Boston Symphony Orchestra in a concert performance of Berg's Wozzeck on March 15th. Tickets at carnegiehall.org.
This is WNYC, 93.9 FM and AM 820, NPR News and the New York Conversation.
This is the New Yorker Radio Hour. I'm David Remnick. Jane Campion's film, The Power of the Dog, opens like a classic Western. There's cattle being herded across the sweeping plains, imposing mountains in the distance. We're on a ranch in Montana.
25 years since our first run together. 1900 and nothing.
It's a long time.
Not too damn long.
So the plot of the film isn't exactly a Western. It's an intense drama about two brothers. Brothers who share the business, but seem to be opposites in almost every way. It chronicles what happens when one of those brothers marries and brings his wife and her teenage son to the family home. Jane Campion is a true auteur with a highly personal style, dreamlike, but often brutal. She's found mainstream success telling very idiosyncratic stories. The Power of the Dog is nominated for 12 Oscars, the most of any film this year, including Best Picture and Best Director. Jane?
Yes, hi, David.
I spoke with Jane Campion last week. Well, this film is adapted from a novel from 1967 by Thomas Savage. Why did this one hit home to you? You must go through stacks and stacks of novels,
Yeah.
All kinds of source material that might make up a film, and you don't.
It's a brilliant novel. I mean, it's a forgotten, unloved, uncherished book, but I think it's just actually quite brilliant. And you also feel the truth in it. You know, like this is almost something between a memoir and a fiction. You know, that the way he writes is so detailed and particular that you know he's lived it. You know, it's his lived experience, and it feels like something you can totally trust.
One of the things I assume you have to deal with is you're not only adapting from a particular novel, you're also either up against or aware of a whole tradition of Western movies in the history of American filmmaking.
Yeah.
And how did you view your film against all those many either genre pictures or John Ford pictures or that whole long and complicated tradition?
Well, I don't understand the whole of the long, complicated tradition, but it is a very romantic genre that all of us, everybody, me included, have fantasies about. What I felt my allegiance to was Thomas Savage's particular story. You know, here I had someone who really did grow up in the West, who was irritated by the romance of the West and found it to be not showing the best of men sometimes, but the worst of them.
Mm.
So he wrote a very particular tale. It's not trying to say, oh, this is the West, but it is a counterpoint, I think, and, you know, and a subversive one to the dominant, I suppose, fairy tale of it, you know?
You know, last week, the actor Sam Elliott, who's played a hell of a lot of cowboys in a lot of Hollywood movies, went on a podcast, Marc Maron's podcast, and Maron asked him what he thought about Power of the Dog. And Elliott really slammed the movie. He asked what a person from New Zealand knows about making Westerns, why you'd shoot in New Zealand, and in general criticized your portrayal of cowboy life.
Yeah.
Do you have any response to that? Do you care?
I love Sam Elliott. He's a wonderful actor, and you know, I understand that from his point of view of playing classical cowboys and feeling like in some way he and his cohorts own that genre. It must be disturbing, but you know, I have to point out that there were women in the West as well. They weren't all whores or whatever else, and you know, there were plenty of women that were watching and had very different points of view about how things were happening. And also that Sam, I don't know how old he is, but I'm sure he wasn't there and around in 1925, and he sure as hell wasn't living on the ranch that Thomas Savage was living on or in his skin. And so I think it's, you know, that problem of, you know, a certain generation of men having problems accepting other people's points of view.
Now, your films are not always, but usually centered around female leads. I don't know what the arithmetic is there, but it's more often than not. Here, this is not the case, although obviously Kristen Dunst has a big role in this.
Yes.
Was that a particular interest in pursuing a more male-oriented story, or it was just by the by?
It was a kind of casualty of just falling in love with this book. I mean, it wasn't lost on me either, like, oh my God, here we are, my first male lead, and what a guy, you know? So and I thought about it a little bit because, you know, I think being one of the few female directors out there for some time, I used to feel very strongly that I needed to keep telling stories about women that meant something to me. But I think with the advent of Me Too movement, that, you know, things have really changed, and they have, you know, really changed for the better. You know, for a very long time there was an extraordinary lack of equality for women in our industry, and their systemic abuse, you know, didn't feel like an urgent problem or even a problem. And that change, I feel it extremely, and I think it's emboldening a lot of women to do whatever they want to do. And you know, I think there's a kind of fearless urgency that is producing some really interesting work from women that came about because of, you know, their support by both you know, men and women. And, you know, and that sort of shift, that dynamic shift in the industry, which is a bit like the Berlin Wall coming down.
And it's that market. You feel it.
The statistics are so stark. They tell the story anyway. But to tell it in a human way, this is how I would recount it, as someone who lived through it, you know, who's been in the industry for 40 years, that the inequality was noted, but it wasn't urgent, you know?
Yeah, you had experience with Harvey Weinstein, about which the New Yorker and the New York Times did a lot of reporting.
Yes.
And you worked with him pretty closely on the piano. And were you...
Well, I didn't work closely with him on the piano. No, he bought it when it was finished.
So did you have much contact with him?
Well, I mean, I live in Australia and New Zealand, and he lives in New York. I did work on Holy Smoke with him, and it was a pretty horrendous experience.
How so?
Because he didn't like the story, which is really not surprising when you think about it. And you think about what Holy Smoke was about, which is young girl taking on a man who, fancies himself as a cult breaker and but has a crush on the girl, and the girl doesn't like him, and fancies that she's going to teach him a bit of what it feels like to be a woman treated in that way. Anyway, he really hated the film, and maybe I don't know if it was because the film was actually bad or not. I think probably it's okay, but he wanted me to change it, and he really just screamed down the telephone at me, almost like a shark attack.
A shark attack.
And I can just remember saying to him, Harvey, why are you speaking like this? This is so uncivil, You can't talk to people like that. It's horrible.
That turned out to be the least of it, almost.
Well, yeah, I never actually suffered any sexual abuse from Harvey at all. He wasn't interested in me in that way. But I just didn't know it was so systemic, like it was happening to so many people.
Yeah. Jen, I want to play a clip from the film. Your films often center around characters that have some quality that makes them, let's just say, hard to love. And Phil Burbank is certainly that. And he and some of the other farmhands are sitting down to dinner, and they're being served by a young man named Peter, played by Cody Smith-McPhee. And we'll hear Phil making fun of the way Peter is holding a napkin.
Now, gentlemen, look, see, that's what you do with the cloth.
It's really just for wine drips.
Oh, you got that, boys? Only for the drip. Now get us some food.
And the thing is, as the film progresses, you find some empathy in him. He changes somewhat. Where did you draw from in imagining Phil's character, or is it all there in the novel written out for you?
I think it's an alchemy between what was imagined and written by Thomas Savage and who Benedict is as an actor and a man in his interpretation. I think Benedict can really open up in an extraordinarily beautiful way to his emotions that if he wasn't able to do that, would be a very different portrait. But I think he brings us into the sort of dark, treacly, disturbed heart of Phil, which is, so lonely and vulnerable and yearning for a full life he can never lead because of who he is.
He sounds like, Benedict Cumberbatch sounds like an incredibly intense artist, and you have formed over time very intense relationships with various leading
You say
actors.
It intense like it's a scary thing.
Well, I gather that he is very much of in the modern sense, a method actor. What was the reality of that?
Benedict is everything. He's very funny, and he's very personable, and he's very affectionate and warm-hearted. Because he and I agreed, and I asked him to stay in character on this set because it's such a long way from who he is, and it helped all of us to know that Phil was on set, and so that if he would argue with me sort of as Phil, and about what we were going to do. And he likes, I think, Ben, to have a dialogue that goes on, like he's got a monologue in his head that goes on, and then it becomes verbal, He verbalizes it, and he starts to talk about the options, this, that, and he really is thinking of every possible, variation that you could do on any scene. And at a certain point, I accompany him in this because it seems like something that is his process. And then after a while I go, let's just do it, eh?
So even when he's having lunch or talking with you about various parts of the film and the cameras are not rolling, he's in character. He's not the kind of posh Englishman that we kind of know from red carpet interviews.
Yeah. I mean, we didn't have lunch together, but we had many social events together. But yeah, no, on set he was Phil, and it really gave him, you know, that beautiful space to just not have to be the nice actor guy, you know, celebrity that everybody wants a picture taken with. And he, you know, that one of the requests that I had during rehearsal was that he every day said no and never said thank you, you know, for as many things as possible. So he just lost all responsibility to politeness, which he said actually was a great freedom. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, you've had an astonishing career, and you continue to make just amazing work. You've had big hits. You've won big awards, revered by your peers, and you haven't had to make a Marvel movie yet. I wonder if it feels that way to you. What's missing from the picture I just painted of your career? What have been the real obstacles and downsides?
I am, you know, like a loner and also a really sociable person. So I really love working with colleagues and having fun. I mean, you know, my idea about life is like, you know, the best thing you can possibly do is laugh, you know, and I just love laughing. I love people make me laugh. So the big hole is comedy. I would really, it would be really fun to be a comic or a comedian or make films that make everybody laugh and be able to sit there in the cinema and just hear people really have some belly laughs, you know. I mean, I'd love to just be there while Ab Fab and all that lot do their stuff, or the Bridesmaids crew, you know. I'd do anything just to be on those sets, you know. Because as I say, you know, I think that, you know, there's nothing more wonderful than laughing.
Jane Campion, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, David.
Jane Campion is the director and screenwriter of The Power of the Dog. It's been nominated for 12 Academy Awards, and that ceremony, of course, takes place on March 27th. And next week, we'll present one of the most important rituals in cinema. We'll give out the coveted awards known as the Brodies, recognizing the most visionary films of the year, according to The New Yorker's Richard Brody. I hope you'll join us. There's more to come on the New Yorker Radio Hour today, so stick around.
The New Yorker Radio Hour is supported by Indeed with Instant Match, a hiring tool instantly delivering to businesses a list of candidates whose resumes on Indeed match the job description. Learn more at Indeed.com/credit.
On last week's Wait, Wait, Hari Kondabolu revealed he's not just a panelist on our show, he's also a fan.
That joke hurt me as a comedian and a citizen of the world.
I'm Peter Sagal. This week we're talking how to monobob and why with Olympic champion Alana Myers-Taylor. Join us for the news quiz from NPR. This morning at 11 on WNYC.
Support for WNYC comes from Optimum Business. Running a business never stops. Optimum Business Secure Internet comes with built-in security and available at speeds up to 1 gig. More at optimum.com/business or 866-580-1480. Leadership support for WNYC comes from the Jerome L. Green Foundation, a proud supporter of New York City's major cultural institutions, providing scholarships in the arts, education, and medicine.
Women's history as told by the people who were there.
There were women in positions of power in publishing. It was possible for a woman to say of this book, this is the story of my life, and I'm going to make it a huge book.
I'm Claire Bowes. Join me for a special edition of Witness, Women's History Month, from the BBC World Service.
Tune in Monday night at 8 on 93.9 FM, AM 820, or live stream it at WNYC.org.
This is the New Yorker Radio Hour. I'm David Remnick. Staff writer Jonathan Blitzer recently profiled Caetano Veloso, the great Brazilian musician, although, as John writes, the phrase great musician doesn't really cut it. Veloso is a Brazilian national treasure. He's one of its finest songwriters. He was also a political prisoner and then in exile. He's a voice of the 60s who, at the age of 79, is as active in making new music as he ever was. Here's Jonathan Blitzer.
The first time I became aware of Caetano Veloso, I was in my early 20s.
I was living in New York, and I wandered into a movie theater somewhere uptown for an evening showing of a film by the great Spanish director, Pedro Almodóvar. And the movie was called Talk to Her, Hable con ella. And I went into the movie not knowing specifically what to expect beyond the fact that this is a director I loved, and I just kind of wanted to bliss out and watch this movie. There is a scene right next to a pool in this villa somewhere in Spain, and there's a group of people who have assembled to listen to musicians sing. That's Caetano Veloso. He appears in this scene. And he's sitting on a chair in front of a microphone, kind of gazing out into the distance, and is singing this song. It's called Cucurucucu Paloma. This is a Mexican folk song from the 1950s. He has this liquid melodic tenor that also just drifts so effortlessly into falsetto. And I can't remember how I began to piece together, who this man was, why I needed to hear more of him. But it became an obsession.
John, I had the honor of attending your wedding to our colleague Alexandra Schwartz, in fact, and you guys walked down the aisle to one of Caetano Veloso's songs.
We chose Oração ao Tempo, a prayer to time. It's an older song, but there's a more recent version we especially liked.
És senhor tão bonito quanto a cara do meu filho.
And a lot of people at that wedding came up to us afterwards and said, who is that?
Vou te fazer pedido. Tempo, 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 tempo. Compositor de destinos, tambor de todos.
Now, pop music stars usually don't sustain a career for forever and ever. I mean, they have a moment in time, and if they're lucky and if they strike some chord, they're there, and then things fade. But Caetano Veloso is hardly a new artist. He's released about 50 albums. He's composed music for several singers and musicians over the years, including his sister. What was it like being with him, and why has he been able to sustain that popularity and creative fervor for so long?
I mean, he is constantly reinventing himself and his music to a degree that is honestly voracious. A friend of his, David Byrne, was telling me that that's the thing he actually admires most about Caetano and is intimidated by, even. The fact that every album is new, every composition goes in a new direction. He is just, kind of constantly hungering after new musical sounds and experiences. And to hang out with him, you kind of even get a little glimmer of a sense of it, because you're just seeing what he's reading, what he's listening to. It's in every direction. It's classical music, it's pop music, it's hip hop, everything. Nothing is too low or too high for him. He just kind of consumes it all, and then somehow weaves together this concoction that is just his.
Now, you've been tasked with choosing just 4 songs from Caetano's enormous body of work. What do you have for us? I bet it was. What do you have for us first here?
Well, I was moving chronologically, and I thought I would start with a song called Coração Vagabundo, or Wandering Heart. And it's one of the first songs he ever wrote. He wrote it when he was 21 years old.
Meu coração não se cansa de ter esperança de dia ser tudo o que quer. Meu coração de criança
It's written in this kind of bossa nova style. He released it and immediately said that, okay, this is an end of a chapter for me. I'm already going to be moving in a different direction after this song. But this is a song he's always loved. His collaborators have always loved. It's just a song that persists through time as a classic.
Eventually, Caetano develops what's known as tropicalia music, a kind of movement. What is that?
That movement is, about bringing in international rock forms and fusing them with traditional Brazilian music, sambas and kind of old classics. And at that time, there were street protests in Brazil in the middle of a military dictatorship in which leftists protested the rise of the electric guitar in Brazilian music. I mean, this was, hard-fought territory, and Caetano kind of blew right through it and started incorporating rock sounds from, English neo-rock, as he called it, and American, Hendrix stuff and the Beatles, and kind of fusing it all together. It was a total sensation, and it lasted a few years, and it basically landed Caetano in prison.
Now, I think I can pronounce your next selection. It's called 9 out of 10. Tell us about that song.
So this is a song that Caetano wrote while he was living in exile in London. So he spent 2 years in political exile from the dictatorship. And I've always loved this song because there is a moment in his time in London when he's really struggling with depression. Here he is in exile. His life has been upended. And this song in particular, to me, it captures this battle that he's fighting, where he chooses life. There's a line where he says, I'm walking down the road, I'm hearing reggae music, I'm alive, alive, alive. He keeps repeating it, then he drifts into Portuguese and says it in Portuguese. He says, there's the sound of music rumbling in my belly.
Walk down Portobello Road to the sound of reggae. I'm alive. The age of gold, just the age of old. The age of gold, the age of music's past. Hear them talk as I walk, as I hear them talk. I hear they say, expect the final blast. Walk down Portobello Road to the sound of reggae. I'm alive, I'm alive, e vivo, muito vivo, vivo, vivo. Feel the sound of music banging in my belly, 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 belly.
I just feel like it's a very personal song, and I know that he's always been particularly proud of this album. It's from an album called Trança, which he started in England and then ended up finishing in Brazil after returning a few years later.
Now, he returned, as I understand it, at the suggestion of his hero and sometime collaborator, João Gilberto, the great pioneer of bossa nova.
Yeah, I mean, Caetano once said to me, I didn't believe in God, but I believe in João Gilberto. And he received a call one day in the early 1970s while he's living in London from João Gilberto. And Gilberto says to him, Caetano, you have to come home. Now is the time. And of course, this is not a man who's particularly well known for his practical acumen or his political understanding of what's going on in Brazil at the time, Gilberto. And so Caetano understandably says, how do you know it's safe? And he and his wife at the time then set out to try to figure out whether or not they can return. And, will they immediately be imprisoned again? What will happen? They kind of can't get any firm answers. They decide to roll the dice. And then when they touch down, it all happens exactly as Gilberto says it would. He's welcomed, no problems at the airport. He's able to kind of ease back into his old life.
Now, what is the next song, your third song?
The third song is a beautiful one called Terra. And this is a song that Caetano wrote 10 years after his time in prison. So it came out in the late 1970s. The lyrics refer to a specific moment when he was in prison, when his then wife comes to him with a magazine that had photographs taken by astronauts of the Earth from outer space. And it was this incredibly poignant experience for him because here he was wasting away in this tiny jail cell, and he's seeing some of the first photographs of the Earth from space.
Eu me encontrava preso na cela de uma cadeia. Foi que eu vi pela primeira vez as tais fotografias em que apareces inteira, porém lá não estavas nua, e sim coberta de nu.
John, help us out with the lyrics here.
He's describing sitting in a jail cell when he sees these photographs of Earth taken from outer space, and he points out that Earth isn't naked because she's wearing the clouds around her.
Quem jamais te esqueceria. Ninguém supõe a morena dentro da estrela azulada, na vertigem do cinema. Mando um abraço pra ti, pequenina, como se eu fosse.
Your fourth song, your final and favorite track maybe, what is it? And is it in the same mode as Terra?
Well, I picked it in part because it sounds completely different. It sounds like it's from an entirely different artist, which is the sensation you get listening to Caetano. This song is called The 13th of May, which is the day that slavery was abolished in Brazil in 1888. Caetano is from Bahia, which was a kind of major hub of the Brazilian slave trade. And it's also, not unrelatedly, the home of samba, which is an Afro-Brazilian musical form, which is kind of at the core of a lot of Brazilian popular music and definitely at the core of Caetano's music. And so this is a song about the day that slavery was abolished, and it's set specifically in the town where Caetano grew up, Santo Amaro. And
this is on an album from 2000.
This is on an album from 2000 called Nights of the North. And the entire album is dedicated to Afro-Brazilian percussion from Brazil's Northeast.
Dia 13 de maio em Santo Amaro, na Praça do Mercado, os pretos celebravam, talvez hoje ainda o façam, o fim da escravidão, o fim da escravidão, o fim da escravidão,
Now, John, you write that Caetano originally wanted to make movies, but he ended up making music because of the political persecution he experienced long ago. He is now 79. Has he expressed any regrets about the creative life he could have had? Is he a happy guy?
You know, I have to say, he said to me many times that, he fell into music, he was interested in other art forms. I mean, I believe him, I take him at his word, but I'm somewhat skeptical because it's hard for me to imagine him doing anything else. One thing that his friend Gilberto Gil told me is the reason Caetano says things like that is because he can do all of it. And he just chose music, but he could have been a painter, he could have been a writer, he could have been a filmmaker. It's hard for me, I can't imagine Caetano doing anything but making music like this.
You can read Jonathan Blitzer's profile of Caetano Veloso at NewYorker.com. Veloso's most recent album is Meio Coco. I'm David Remnick, and that's the New Yorker Radio Hour for today. Thanks for joining us.
The New Yorker Radio Hour is a co-production of WNYC Studios and The New Yorker. Our theme music was composed and performed by Merrill Garbus of Tune Yards, with additional music by Alexis Quadrado. The New Yorker Radio Hour is supported in part by the Chirina Endowment Fund.
Os pretos celebravam, talvez hoje ainda o façam.
Women's history as told by the people who were there.
There were women in positions of power in publishing. It was possible for a woman to say of this book, this is the story of my life, and I'm going to make it a huge book.
I'm Claire Bowes. Join me for a special edition of Witness, Women's History Month, from the BBC World Service.
Tune in Monday night at 8 on 93.9 FM, AM 820, or live stream it at wnyc.org.
WNYC is supported by Hulu, presenting the new limited series, The Dropout. Starring Amanda Seyfried, the series explores the rise and fall of Elizabeth Holmes, the founder and CEO of Theranos, who sought to revolutionize the face of healthcare. Streaming now on Hulu. The New Jersey Department of Transportation reminding drivers to drive with respect for their highway workers by safely moving over for all first responders and essential roadway workers.
This is WNYC 93.9 FM and HD New York. This is WNYC AM 820 New York.
From NPR and WBEZ Chicago, this is Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me, the NPR News Quiz. I'm Bill Curtis.
And I'm Peter Sagal. This week, Americans finally stopped worrying about their own troubles and turned their attention to the plight of others. People who truly were engaged in a struggle for their very lives and free... Wait a minute. It costs how much to fill up my F-150? We'll ask about what really matters, apparently. Plus, Alana Myers-Taylor, the most decorated American Olympic bobsledder ever, teaches us how to go down easy. And Bill Curtis reminds us that once the world opens up again, the groupies will be back.
Try to learn to live with them.
We'll ask who really is coming, like it or not, on our quiz, coming up right after this hour's news.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Windsor Johnston. Air raid sirens are sounding in a number of cities across Ukraine today. Russian forces continue to step up their offensive in the eastern and southern parts of the country. NPR's Lauren Frere reports explosions are also being reported in the Ukrainian capital as Russian troops close in on the city.
With Russian forces positioned less than 20 miles from central Kyiv, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky gave a speech in the middle of the night in which he addressed the mothers of Russian conscripts. Do not send your children to fight in a foreign land, he said in Russian in a video shared on social media. Zelensky said the southern port city of Mariupol is still under siege and that the mayor of another southern city had been detained by the Russians. Hundreds of people rallied in front of his city hall Saturday, chanting for his release. In a third southern city, Ukrainian officials and doctors accused Russia of damaging a cancer hospital and residential buildings. Fortunately, no one was killed there, they say. Lauren Frere, NPR News in Lviv, Ukraine.
The Justice Department has assembled a new task force to go after billionaire oligarchs who enable the Russian government. NPR's Carrie Johnson reports it's part of an effort to freeze the assets of those who have violated sanctions imposed on Moscow for its invasion of Ukraine.
Prosecutors, FBI agents, and translators are working together on the new effort. A Justice Department official says they'll charge people who evade sanctions or engage in money laundering and bank fraud. That includes oligarchs as well as banks and money transfer facilities that allow the flow of dirty money. Authorities say some of those funds have paid for luxury real estate and yachts, which they'll try to seize through criminal and civil law. The Justice Department says it's looking for any legal way to disrupt the Russian war regime. Carrie Johnson, NPR News, Washington.
The newly elected president of Chile is pledging to govern the country in the interest of all its people. The BBC's Katie Watson reports in his first presidential address, Gabriel Boric promised to advance the rights of women and indigenous minorities.
Standing on the balcony of La Moneda Presidential Palace, Gabriel Boric gave an emotional speech about inclusion and equality, telling Chileans that he would make sure that everyone was listened to and represented, no matter their beliefs. But with a divided Congress and plenty of political opponents in conservative Chile, he will have a challenge on his hands to deliver on his promises, such as tax reforms and an overhaul of the pension and healthcare systems. And with a majority female cabinet sworn in, already Chile's government is looking very different.
That's the BBC's Katie Watson reporting. You're listening to NPR News in Washington.
This is WNYC in New York. I'm David First. Starting Monday, New Yorkers will start to see the NYPD's new neighborhood safety teams patrolling certain parts of the city. NYPD officials announced the rollout yesterday. The teams are part of Mayor Eric Adams' plan to fight gun violence in the city. NYPD Commissioner Keechant Sewell says the teams will start in 25 precincts.
These teams are there for gun violence,
They're there for criminal activity, but they look like police officers. They are not in plain clothes.
The safety teams have received criticism from reform advocates who worry that they will be too similar to the anti-crime patrols that were involved in several high-profile police killings. Sewell's announcement comes amid a 47% spike in overall major crime across the city. Shootings are up 14% compared to the same time last year. Early voting begins today in a special election in the 43rd State Assembly seat for the 43rd State Assembly seat in Brooklyn. The seat was held by Diana Richardson, who was tapped by Brooklyn Borough President Antonio Reynoso to serve as Deputy Borough President. The district includes the neighborhoods of Prospect, Lefferts Gardens, and portions of Crown Heights. There are 3 candidates on the ballot. Brian Cunningham is running as a Democrat. Messidor Azor is the Republican and conservative candidate. Jelani Deschong is on the ballot for the Working Families Party. 2 early voting sites are located at the Bedford Union Armory and at Downstate Medical Center. To find out at which site you are assigned to, go to vote.nyc. 44 degrees now. We're going to see the temperatures dropping to the low to mid-20s by 5 p.m. today. The rain shifting to snow. We could see 2 inches of snow falling in the city. Could be more like 2 to 5 inches north and west of New York City. This is WNYC.
Support for NPR comes from Carnegie Corporation of New York, supporting innovations in education, democratic engagement, and the advancement of international peace and security. More information is available online at carnegie.org.
That mystery meat of indeterminate origin? Turns out it has quite the backstory. On the next Planet Money, the Spam labor strike that threatened to tear one small town apart. And on How I Built This, Miguel McKelvey tells us about the rise and fall of the co-working company he helped found, WeWork. That's on the next How I Built This and Planet Money from NPR.
Today at 3 on 93.9 FM and AM 820, WNYC.
The following program was taped before an audience of no one.
From NPR and WBEZ Chicago, this is Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me, the NPR News Quiz. Quit your belly aching and start your belly aching. I'm Bill Curtis, and here's your host, a man I consider a brother, which is why we sleep in bunk beds each night. It's Peter Sagal.
Thank you, Bill, and thanks once again to the live audience we had last week. You probably heard that the recent Beijing Winter Olympics introduced a new sport called monobob, which raised a lot of questions, all of which were basically, what? So, we have invited on Ilana Myers-Taylor, the most decorated American Olympic bobsledder ever, to explain it all. But first, we want to hear about the strange thing that you're better at than anybody else is, so give us a call. The number is 1-888-WAIT-WAIT. That's 1-888-924-8924. Now let's welcome our first listener contestant. Hi, you're on Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me.
Hello, my name is Frankie Rogers, and I'm calling from Kearney, Nebraska.
Kearney, Nebraska. I just love the sound of an authentic Nebraska accent. Are you from around there?
Oh, no, I'm a temporary immigrant, you could say.
You sound British, are you?
Yes, exactly.
And how does a person from the UK end up in Nebraska?
Not out of choice.
Okay, well, that's good enough for us. Well, welcome to the show, Francis. Let me introduce you to our panel this week. First up, it's a comedian and host of Fake the Nation. You can see her in Chicago at the Lincoln Lodge on April 15th and 16th, and at Joe's Pub in New York on April 30th. Negin Farsad.
Hey, hello.
Next, correspondent at Vice and host of the podcast Cheat, we welcome back Alzo Slade.
Hey, what's happening?
And her HBO special, Cats, Cops, and Stuff, is now available as an album wherever you might stream or download your music. It's Paula Poundstone.
Hey, I've been to Nebraska. It's great.
It's a fine place. It's a fine place. Francis, welcome to the show. You're going to play Who's Bill this time. Bill Curtis is going to read you 3 quotations from the week's news. Your job, correctly identify or explain just 2 of them. Do that, you will win our prize. Any voice from our show you might choose on your voicemail. You ready to play?
Well, let's get on with it.
I love the enthusiasm.
You can take the man out of Britain, but you can't take the Britain out of the man. I love that.
And you combine that with that Cornhusker excitement.
Oh, man.
I am nervous. I'm a little bit nervous.
All right. Francis, your first quote is someone telling us everything he can do to stop the astronomically rising price of gasoline.
Can't do much.
So who said he's not going to do much about the price of gas?
Biden?
Yes, Joe Biden, our president. According to AAA, the average price for a gallon of gas hit $4.25 this week. Though it was 5 cents cheaper at the very next exit, oh, you should have kept going. Biden claims that the incredibly high gas prices are Russia's responsibility, but that's awfully convenient coming from a man whose prom date was an Amtrak train.
Oh my God, Biden should be out there putting on his leather jacket and his aviator glasses and should be out on those oil rigs drilling for solar panels. Okay,
Exactly.
That's what Biden should be doing.
I was thinking that he should be at the full serve. You know,
Really?
you pull up and he's get the windshield for you, ma'am. Absolutely. Thank you.
I think that the high gas prices is just another ploy to lock us down, because now that the COVID restrictions have been lifted for the most
Right.
part, COVID is like, yeah, go outside. But then gas prices are like, no, we're not going to let you go
like
anywhere.
this weird existential conspiracy just to keep us at home.
That's right.
The news, by the way, and I don't need to tell you guys this because you're there. The news is hitting particularly hard in car-dependent cities like Los Angeles or Atlanta, while New Yorkers, of course, are just
I know.
laughing. New Yorkers are just laughing in their kitchens, which are also their bedrooms.
I just want to say, as the New Yorker on the show this week, everything in my apartment is now powered by whale blubber.
Yes, the old-fashioned way. It's artisanal.
No, exactly.
It's all whale blubber over in Williamsburg now. Those hipsters, man. Now, it's unclear. It's politically fraught. It's unclear what happens to Democrats who hold the presidency when gas prices skyrocket. We've reached out to a historian specializing in Jimmy Carter's second term for comment.
But what I love is that, you know, Biden says we're not gonna get any oil from Russia, but hey, Venezuela, I know we're not cool anymore, but I was just wondering if we could, you know what I'm saying? If you could just spare a little oil for us.
All we're doing here is switching drug dealers. It's really not a moral, upgrade in any way. All right, Francis, your next quote is about a giant palm-sized creature that falls from the sky.
Try to learn to live with them.
That was an ecologist from the University of Georgia talking about a new species of what that is poised to invade the Northeast.
Canada geese. I don't know.
Canada geese are awful. But they're larger than palms. This is much ickier and creepier than Canada geese.
Ickier and creepier.
I'll give you a hint. In addition to flying through the air and being about the size of your palm, they also spin 10-foot wide webs.
Flying spiders?
Flying spiders, yes. According to entomologists, an invasive species of giant parachuting spiders will soon be infesting the northeast coast of the United States. Scientists believe they may be dangerous because they just upgraded from parachutes to jetpacks.
How did they get here, these invasive?
Well,
no
they
no
originate in
spiders.
Japan. And the assumption was that because they're from a fairly warm place, they wouldn't do well in the cold weather. So basically what scientists did was they decided to see how they do in the cold. So they basically put them in a freezer, and these spiders took to it like a crowd at the polar plunge. Like, whoa, this is what I call spider weather. And then they took off their shirts and they wrote letters on their chests. It was like, what are you doing, guys? It's cold out.
But I feel like you're giving them a really bad rap, because what if these spiders come to America and they Goodwill hunting us, right? And they're just sort of like gems in the rough, and it turns out they can do math, and fall in love.
Yeah, that would be a surprising ending to the story. That's for sure.
What?
But that
I think the fact that they can survive extreme climates and they're really harmless, I think the roaches of the world are going to be jealous.
Because that's their gig. They're the ones that survived the nuclear winter.
That's what I'm saying. And so the roaches are like, wait, you're taking my position in this world.
That's their gig, man. That's their gig.
This is it's like a Love Island rivalry that's going to develop.
I bet they're going to show off in front of the roaches, like they're parachuting. What can a roach do? It's afraid of light.
Well, roaches, some roaches do have their pilot's license though. So these spiders just have their paratrooper license certification. That's
That's a good point right there. Yeah.
All right, Francis, here is your last quote.
Same bat time, different bat price.
That was Entertainment Weekly talking about how theaters are charging more for people to see what hit movie.
Is it the Batman?
It is not a Batman, sir. It is the Batman. That's the name of the movie. Hollywood, that's a town in California where they do nothing but make movies about Batman, has just made a new film about Batman. It's called this time The Batman, and it's become the highest grossing movie of the year, beating out the prior record holder, a movie called I Don't Care What It Is, I Just Want to Get Out of the House. And here's the thing. Theaters have been adding like a $1.50 surcharge to the tickets to see this movie because it is a movie people really want to see and because they can. What are you going to do? Stay home and scroll mindlessly through Netflix for another lost evening of your precious short life?
You know what they could have done that wouldn't seem as evil?
What?
Is they could have made the large popcorn larger and then charged for that.
Have another tier.
But no, Paula, that's not what they do. They charge you. I mean, you don't want the popcorn larger. You want the popcorn smaller.
Smaller, but call it a large.
Because the small popcorn is enormous and charges, it's like $5 when the large popcorn is $6, right? They don't want you to buy a small popcorn because then they don't make as much money.
What theaters are you all going to where the popcorn is $5?
That was sort of an arbitrary number. I mean, you're obviously
because the popcorns are $72 now,
Yes.
Peter. You need to get with the times.
Peter's going back in time to the picture show.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, when I go down to the Nickelodeon, yes.
I like the old Batman. I like the television Batman.
The funny Batman.
You mean like the boom bang pop?
Yes, exactly.
Adam West.
Yes. I can't, to me, a fight scene isn't real unless you see the word zap on the screen.
Kapow.
Yeah. Kapow is the best.
But that Batman and his homie Robin, they were pitifully out of shape. They had bellies and...
They did. It was a different time. There were different styles.
You could do a movie with just a 1-pack. You didn't need a 6-pack.
It was like boom, bang, flop, flap.
Yeah. The sound effects were from their muffin tops hitting other parts of their bodies.
Yeah.
Bill, how did Francis do in our quiz?
Francis was that man 3 in a row.
Hey.
Oh,
yay!
Whoa.
So good.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Peter. It's been great to be on.
It's been great. Take care,
you.
Francis. Right now, panel, it is time for you to answer some questions about this week's news. Nagin, you remember Trump aide Stephen Miller, because trauma is always hard to forget. Mr. Miller has objected to the January 6th committee subpoena of his phone records, but in doing so, we learned something about him. What?
Oh my God, I think I remember this. He is still on his parents' cell phone plan?
That's exactly right, Nagin. Stephen Miller is still on his parents' phone plan, and he's a grown man. It's been 36 years since he burst from the chest of an unsuspecting astronaut.
He's a grown man, but he still loves when his dad comes home from work to put on his dad's big shoes and clunk around in them. He might want to work with an image person. Because
I love
sometimes once you know something about somebody, then suddenly when you look at them, you see something different. You know, but you don't have to know anything at all about him, and you look at him and you see it.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, I mean, he looks so evil that his actual face looks like a deep fake of his actual face.
Yeah,
and of course, the surprising thing about this story is Stephen Miller has parents. That's great, We assumed his mother abandoned the nest after parachuting down from a tree and laying all the eggs. Coming up, find out who's finally going to save the earth in our Bluff the Listener game. Call 1-888-WAIT-WAIT to play. We'll be back in a minute with more Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me from NPR.
I really hope I don't get strikes for that. Never listening to music. During our membership drive, we asked you to support WNYC, and thousands of you did. I'm Brooke Gladstone from On the Media, and I want to thank everyone who became a member. But if you haven't pledged yet, you know you still can. Call us at 888-376-WNYC or at WNYC.org. And seriously, thanks.
WNYC supporters include New York City Center Encores, presenting The Life, directed and adapted by Billy Porter from an original score by Cy Coleman. 7 performances only, March 16th through 20th. Tickets at newyorkcitycenter.org.
You're listening to Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me here on WNYC. We are expecting the temperature to continue dropping during the day today, and another blast of winter weather as this rain is going to mix with sleet and become snow by early afternoon. There's a wind advisory in effect that has already gone into effect, and that stays with us to 4 a.m. tomorrow morning. We could see gusts up to 50 miles per hour during the day and overnight tonight. And when we're looking at snow totals, it looks like we could see up to 2 inches of snow in New York City, more like the possibility of 2 to 5 inches north and west of the city. Right now, 20 minutes after 11, this is WNYC.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations and the NPR Wine Club, bringing the wine world to people's homes with wines inspired by NPR, like Planet Money Cabernet Sauvignon. Available to adults 21 years or older at nprwineclub.org. Procter & Gamble, maker of Nervive Nerve Relief. Nervive is designed to reduce occasional nerve aches, weakness, and discomfort in hands or feet. Learn more at nervivehealth.com. And DuckDuckGo, committed to making privacy online simple. Used by tens of millions, they offer internet privacy with one download. DuckDuckGo, privacy simplified at duckduckgo.com. From NPR and WBEZ Chicago, this is Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me, the NPR News Quiz. I'm Bill Curtis. We're playing this week with Paula Poundstone, Alzo Slade, and Nagin Farsad. And here again is your host, a man who has yet to realize there's a giant parachuting spider on his leg. It's Peter Sagal.
Thank you, Bill. Right now it is time for the Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me bluff. Listen again. Call 1-888-WAIT-WAIT to play our games on the air. Hi, you are on Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me.
Hi, my name's Victoria. I'm from Guilford, Connecticut.
I actually know where Guilford is. What do you do there?
I work in a genetics lab in Branford.
So what kind of genetics do you do? Anything that will result in some sort of horrible monster that ends all life on Earth, please?
Actually, yes.
Whoa!
No, I'm just...
Damn it.
I do DNA sequencing for cancer patients.
Oh, well, that's very useful.
Victoria, I have a genetic pot belly. Is there anything you can do about that, or is it too late?
Well, we're working on cloning people, so perhaps if in the future we can clone you and
with modifications, with improvements.
Yeah.
Well, Victoria, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
You're going to play the game in which you must try to tell truth from fiction. Bill, what is Victoria's topic?
Save the Earth.
Did you know Greenpeace got its start when its founder noticed a whale had a green piece of spinach stuck in its teeth? Turns out that's not the only well-known environmental organization that had an unusual beginning. Our panelists are going to tell you about another environmental group that started in a strange way. Pick the one who's telling the truth. You'll win our prize, the waiter of your choice on your voicemail. Ready to play?
Yes.
All right. First, let's hear from Alzo Slade.
When a man who calls himself Quinn Quinoa moved to San Francisco after graduating from Texas A&M, he had trouble adjusting to the lifestyle. He would have anxiety attacks when throwing trash away because there were 10 bins for a different category of trash. But most importantly, he couldn't seem to get a date. Inviting girls out to get some barbecue didn't work as well as it did back in College Station. Quote, I went on one date, ordered a hamburger, and the next thing you know, she pulled hummus from her purse, threw it at me, and stormed out of the restaurant. So he and his equally hard-up friends formed a vegan male collective that they called the Soy Boys. They started holding all soy-based mixers and encounter sessions. It worked. So well, in fact, that Quinoa is now, first, married to a lovely woman named Quasar, and secondly, he's actually a vegan. The Soy Boys continue to advocate for the plant-based lifestyle, but he asked the San Francisco Chronicle not to use his real name because he still got friends back in Texas.
The Soy Boys, a male vegan collective formed just so the members could meet girls. Your next story of eco origins comes from Paula Poundstone.
Bear Necessities Bear Protection Society in Woodsville, New Hampshire, is a small organization founded in 2021 when 8-year-old Lissa Negrin came home from school with a book from her school library that her parents thought had been banned. We had been unhappy with the school for a while, says Lissa's mother, Rachel Negrin. She had a teacher that told her that the Mayflower smelled. It's so negative. My husband, Ord, and I don't approve of the indoctrination. So we took her out to a family of bears in the woods and left her. A mother bear will care for the young of another species, and bears share a lot of our beliefs. The Negrins kept a distant, watchful eye on their daughter as she thrived among her adopted bear family, and gradually they too were accepted by the bears. We lived with them throughout the fall until my brother Todd came to visit and the bears started to get aggressive. Todd is a bridge too far for lots of us.
Bear Necessities, a bear welfare group founded by a family who sent their own daughter to be raised by bears. Your last story of the beginnings of an environmental group comes from Negin Farsad.
Carly Cindy, an Asheville local, loves the word fart. She loves it so much, she got fart emblazoned on a customized license plate. That's right, fart. She wanted to drive down the street and for people to say, oh, there's Carly. She loves fart. But soon, the city's DMV received complaints. Inexplicably, people don't like farts as much as she does, I guess. And legally, the North Carolina DMV can reject custom plates that they deem lewd or obscene. But what if it's the initials of a reputable organization that just happens to sound like it's lewd or obscene? So Carly created the very real, useful-sounding organization Friends of Asheville Recreational Trails. That's right, fart. She reverse-engineered fart, a lovable, gassy byproduct of the human butt, into an environmental organization, launched a website, and even organized a group hike. Did she bring bean and cheese burritos to the occasion? Probably. She claimed that the acronym really works for her because, quote, I love hiking, biking, and spending time outdoors. I mean, of course she loves spending time outdoors. That's where you can fart without fear of recrimination.
All right. There is an environmental organization out there that started in an odd way. Is it from Alzo, the Soy Boys, a male vegan collective founded by some guys who just wanted to meet, girls? From Paula, Bear Necessities, a bear welfare organization founded by a family who sent their own child to live with bears rather than be indoctrinated in the public schools? Or from Negin Farsad, FART, Friends of Asheville Recreational Trails, founded just so a lady could justify her lewd license plate? Which of these is the real story of an unlikely origin?
It has to be the FART organization.
It has to be. I would concede that on our show you would probably be right, but let's find out. You've chosen Negin's story of the Friends of Asheville Recreational Trails. Well, to bring you the true story, we spoke to the founder of the organization.
FART is an acronym that stands for Friends of Asheville Recreational Trails.
That was Carly Cindy, founder of the Friends of Asheville Recreational Trails, or FART. I'm not going to say it out loud because that's not the policy. You earned a point for Negin just for telling the truth in her patented, charming way. You've won our prize, the voice of your choice in your voicemail. Congratulations. You did great.
Thank you guys so much.
Bye, Victoria.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
And now the game where we ask very competitive people to put that aside and embrace the emptiness of victory. Ilana Myers-Taylor is the most decorated American Olympic bobsledder ever, with 5 Olympic medals, including 2 from the most recent Beijing Olympics. She often says, quote, there are no dumb questions when it comes to bobsledding, and we are delighted to have a chance to prove her wrong. Ilana Myers-Taylor, welcome to Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me.
Thanks for having me. It's such an honor to be here.
It's a thrill. Congratulations on your medals at Beijing. Very exciting. And your record-setting championship run there. We have so many questions. Let me start here. One of the weird things about bobsledding, which we only watch, like most of us, once every 4 years, is it's almost impossible for us viewers to know what the heck you're doing. Yes, you push the sled and jump in. Then what happens?
we are actually driving the sleds, and most people don't realize that because of Cool Runnings. The Disney film kind of hurt us there a little bit. People think we lean and things like that, and that's how we navigate the sled. But I am actually driving the sled.
Yeah.
There's a steering mechanism, and it works like a pulley system, and you just pull left and right, and it moves our runners or our blades left and right to turn on and off of curves.
Right. So you're actually steering. Now that's when you're in front. So
yes.
If you are and I know one of your events is 2-person bobsled. So the person behind pushes, jumps in, and then does what?
They sit there with their head in between their knees and can't see anything. They have blind trust in me to get us down safely and just try to stay in an aerodynamic position as possible. And they don't pull the brakes until actually after we cross the finish line. So nothing.
Right.
Yep.
Right. So, and do they ever, as you're rocketing down, because you guys go pretty fast, like above 80 miles an hour, right? And as you're rocketing down this thing, do you ever hear her going, please God, please, or just like playing, or like maybe backseat driving, like maybe could you slow down a little bit or whatever?
My brakeman at this past Olympics was actually cheering in the back of the sled. I guess she knew our run was going well, and she was actually
What is
cheering.
she saying?
She was screaming. She was, woo, woo, in the back of the sled.
How the heck does she know how well you're doing? Her head's down between her knees in the dark.
She knows we're not hitting walls, so she can feel it if we hit a wall. She knows we're not hitting walls, so it must be going well.
Wow. And is it, and again, I don't know, is it an athletic experience steering the sled, drive? Is that an athletic feat, or is it just, is it more akin to like driving a race car?
It's more akin to driving a race car. And so I like to say I can teach anybody how to get down a bobsled track. Like if you want to drive a bobsled, I can teach you how to get down a track. Now you probably will crash, but you'll get down the track eventually.
Another thing I've always wondered about bobsledding. So, I mean, if you're a runner, you can go run around a track near your house. If you're an ice skater, you can go down to the local ice rink. Is there like a bobsled run near you that you can go practice at on a regular basis?
No, so bobsled tracks are only open 6 months out of the year, from October to April, so to speak. The 2 tracks in the U.S. are in Lake Placid, New York, and Park City, Utah. So those are our home tracks, but we don't have tracks in the Southern Hemisphere. So a lot of the other winter sports, they can practice during the summer months, but we have nothing to do. So we're just doing running and lifting and trying to get strong as fast as possible during the summer until our on-ice season begins.
Well, I just got to ask this question. I've not been to Lake Placid, but I've been to Salt Lake City, and I think it's one of the whitest cities in the country. And I know this because there are no black people working at the airport. When there are no black people at the airport, there are no black people in the city. And like, as a black woman, and you live in Atlanta, Georgia, what has been the response from like the community? It's like, because we don't really do cold like that.
I still don't do cold. I hate the cold. I think it's
funny line of work for someone who doesn't like the cold.
Yeah, I think it's something that the community is kind of first in Lake Placid, New York, because it's such a small town and because it's an Olympic town. They embrace the team regardless of what you look like. And there's always been people of color that have competed in bobsled since the 80s and have had a lot of success. So Lake Placid really embraces us. That being said, though, it took quite a while. It wasn't until recently until they got black hair products. So that's a big step up in Lake Placid. Now I can get my hair. I can't get it done there still, but at least I can get the hair products that I need there now.
So it's totally worth it.
And I got a question I've always wondered. Outside of PR events, do you ever wear your medals just to wear your medals?
I did my first medal. My first medal I wore everywhere. I think my claim to fame was I went into Wendy's and actually asked if they had a bronze medal discount. And they're like, "What the heck?"
Wait a minute. Wait a minute.
That's what I'm talking about.
That? You tried. Yes. You tried to get a discount at Wendy's.
Flex on them. Flex on them.
Yes. Bobsled is not the most glamorous sport.
That's
we're
pretty
very
fucking funny.
We make our way we can. And this was just when I was just won a bronze medal, but I was converting into driver, and it's very expensive to become a driver and things like that. So I needed every dollar I could get. And sure enough, they gave me a free Frosty. So
did they check? Worked. Did they look at it? Did they like bite it to make sure it was real?
They checked the medal. They didn't bite it. Okay. No one's bit it yet, but they definitely checked.
But that I mean,
is a Wendy's Frosty part of your regimen?
No, no, but it's just delicious. I mean, yeah.
couldn't you in the off season? Couldn't you get like a grocery cart and a hill and kind of practice?
My husband tried that, and he actually cut his shin open. Yes,
he tried.
Yes, because he was living in California at the time, which of course has no other bobsled tracks. So he was using a shopping cart and hit a curb and actually busted his shin open. So that ended our shopping cart experiments.
Well, you can't. I mean, you can't really steer a grocery cart.
No.
Yeah.
I just love the idea, like you were both next to the grocery cart. You said 1, 2, 3. You said push, 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 and then you both jump into the grocery cart and go down the hill. That would have been awesome.
If we could have made it into the grocery cart, I think it would have.
Well, Alana, we are delighted to talk to you. We have more questions, but we have business to do. We have a competition of our own. Bill, what is the name of the game?
You've medaled all right in death medal.
So we were thinking Olympic medals, as you well know, are famously quite heavy. So we thought we'd ask you about heavy metal.
Oh, boy.
Answer 2 to 3 questions about heavy metal bands, and you'll win our prize, one of our listeners, the voice of anyone they might choose for their voicemail. Bill, who is Alana Myers playing for?
Jason Hall of Austin, Texas.
All righty then.
I feel like this ain't right, Peter.
Why is it not right?
This ain't right. I mean, it's enough that the black woman is already in bobsledding. Now you're gonna ask her to be knowledgeable about death metal.
I think she's a shill. I think it's going to turn out she knows all about
Yeah, she knows everything about it.
All right, we're gonna find
Let's
out.
go.
Here is your first question. Ready to go? The bandmates of the great metal band Black Sabbath had a unique relationship among themselves. For example, guitarist Tony Iommi would frequently do what to drummer Bill Ward? A, secretly replace his drumsticks with chicken drumsticks. B, convince him they were changing their name to Chartreuse Sabbath. Or C, set him on fire.
Oh, my gosh. I'm going to go with A, replace them with chicken drumsticks.
So chicken drumsticks. How long do you think it would take the drummer to figure that out?
Oh, it would not take him very long. So I'm guessing it might have to be B then?
No, it was, in fact, C, set him on fire. They used to do it all the
Holy
time.
smokes.
They would douse him with rubbing alcohol and light him. And then once, like, the rubbing alcohol soaked into his clothes and actually burned him, so they decided to stop doing that. Oh, you have 2 more chances.
gosh.
Not a problem. Here's your next question. Heavy metal acts like Gwar, for example, we all know Gwar, are famous for their over-the-top costumes. One of the wildest costumed metal bands is a group in which all the members dress up like what? A classical chamber music quartet. B, Ned Flanders from The Simpsons. Or C, 8 giant ladybugs.
Oh, wow. I'll go with B, Ned Flanders.
You're right. Yes. The band is called Oakley Dokley.
Oh, gosh.
All right. You got 1 right with 1 to go. You get this, you win. Here's your last question. Hate Beak is a metal supergroup from Maryland that features whom on lead vocals? A high-end Dyson vacuum cleaner. B, former CIA director Leon Panetta. Or C, an African gray parrot named Waldo.
Oh, boy. No idea. I'm going to go with C, Waldo.
You're right. Waldo the heavy metal parrot. That's why the band is called Hate Beak. Bill, how did Alana do in our quiz?
Well, I'm sure she surprised herself, and she surprised us by winning 2 out of 3, Alana.
Congratulations. My recommendation is you immediately go to your nearest Wendy's and see if they give you a discount for this.
Oh, definitely. I think this is discount worthy for sure.
And when I watch bobsled from now on, I'm gonna be that obnoxious guy that acts like I've known bobsledding for years.
Exactly.
Yeah, you don't understand the technical knowledge the driver must have.
Alana Myers Taylor is the most decorated black athlete in the history of the Winter Olympics and our greatest bobsledder. Alana Myers Taylor, thank you so much for joining us on Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. This is awesome.
Do you slide on all your nights like...
In just a minute, we go under the sea in our listener limerick challenge. Call 1-888-WAIT-WAIT to join us on the air. We'll be back in a minute with more of Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me from NPR.
On the next Radio Lab, how far can you push the human body before it breaks?
I was starting to have nightmares, but I was awake.
People seeing secret code in the cracks of the road. Riders jumping off their bikes to square off and fight mailboxes.
We'll bring you the story of one race.
It's a race that is designed to reveal what human limits are.
That's on the next Radio Lab. Today at noon on 93.9 FM and AM 820 WNYC.
Support for WNYC comes from Apple Original Films, presenting Coda, written and directed by Sean Hayter and starring Marlee Matlin, Amelia Jones, and Troy Kotsur. Awards eligible. More at fyc.appletvplus.com. Rated PG-13.
WNYC, independent journalism in the public interest. 93.9 FM and AM 820. NPR News and the New York Conversation.
We continue with Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me Now here on WNYC, and stay with us for Radio Lab. That gets started at noon. We're expecting the temperature to continue dropping this afternoon down into the low 20s by 5 p.m. The rain shifting over to snow. We could see 2 inches of snow falling here in New York City. It's 11:40.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations and West Beth Entertainment with Professor Brian Cox's new show, Horizons, a physicist's take on the impact of humanity in the universe. Touring North America April through June. Tickets at ProfessorBrianCox.live. Progressive Insurance for protecting everything under one roof by bundling home and auto. Learn more at Progressive.com or 1-800-PROGRESSIVE. And Klaviyo, working to help brands deliver personalized email and SMS campaigns that drive revenue and create genuine customer relationships at KLAVIYO.com/NPR. From NPR and WBEZ Chicago, this is Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me, the NPR News Quiz. I'm Bill Curtis. We are playing this week with Negin Farsad, Paula Poundstone, and Alzo Slade. And here again is your host. We call him Mono Pete. Peter Sagal.
Thanks, Bill. In just a minute, Bill lets the Wild Rampers start in our Listener Limit Challenge. If you'd like to play, give us a call at 1-888-WAIT-WAIT. That's 1-888-924-8924. Right now, panel, it's time for a new game that we're calling
Take That, Putin.
We've actually been hearing a bunch of inspiring stories from Ukraine, and because we know he's a listener, we're going to rub Putin's face in them. We're going to ask you about them rapid fire, true, false style. Get yours right. You get a point. Ready to play?
Yes.
Let's go.
Right. Negin, true or false? Ukrainian farmers have reportedly towed away so many Russian tanks with their tractors that Ukrainian farmers are now Europe's 5th largest army.
True.
Yes. Also, true or false? A grandmother in Kyiv is being celebrated for bringing down a Russian drone with a sniper rifle.
That is true.
No, it is false. She brought it down with a perfect throw of a jar of pickled tomatoes. That's exactly right. Paula, true or false? A restaurant in Canada received dozens of complaints from people who thought their signature dish, poutine, was named after Putin.
Oh, yes.
That is true. Negin, true or false? Ukraine's Federal Tax Bureau told all Ukrainians that they did not have to file their taxes this year because of the war.
True.
No, it's false.
Oh.
They told everyone they did not have to declare the tanks or anything else they seized from the Russians as income. Also, true or false, the Ukrainian company that manufactures electric vehicle charging stations in Russia hacked them remotely so they would stop working.
True, that's true.
No, it's false. They hacked them so the screens would read, "Glory to Ukraine, Putin is a jackass." Paula, true or false, for his unprovoked invasion of Ukraine, Vladimir Putin has been stripped of his black belt by the World Taekwondo Federation.
Yes.
That is true. Negin, true or false, a man in Ireland apologized after crashing a truck full of communion wafers through the gates of the Russian embassy in Dublin.
Oh, true.
No, false. He didn't apologize. He did it, and then he said, "I've done my bit, lads." Thank you all for playing. Take that, Putin. All right, panel. Some more questions for you about the rest of the week's news. Also, a new startup company hopes to make package delivery faster than ever by storing cargo where?
In airplane refrigerators.
No, although that's an interesting idea. It's not it.
Give me a hint.
I'll give you a hint. It's like, Houston, we have a 12-pack of paper towels.
Oh, in satellites?
Yeah, in space, yes.
Yeah.
A new company in California called Inversion wants to cut down a delivery time by sending packages up into space and then, when they're ordered, dropping them down at their destination.
Does that make it quicker?
Yeah, well, because the height of convenience is a case of LaCroix falling down on you at 300 miles an hour on fire.
When the parachute doesn't work.
Apparently. The company's plan is to have these capsules in orbit that could be called down, slowing their descent with parachutes and landing with, tens of miles of the target location. Just think, one day you could have, say, a brand new Instant Pot delivered right to somewhere 10 miles from you for just $79.95 plus $2 million in shipping and handling.
They really took their inspiration from that parachuting spider, huh?
Apparently, yeah. Paula, in Japan, there is a centuries-old famous volcanic rock called the Killing Stone that is said to imprison an ancient evil spirit. No worries, but this week, what happened?
The evil spirit was released.
Yes, it broke open. Hold on to your parachuting death spiders. Things are about to get worse. On Monday, the Killing Stone, as they call it, was found split in two. Legend has it that the stone contained the spirit of an evil nine-tailed fox demon that posed as a woman who tried to kill the emperor in early 12th century Japan. So that witch is out. Experts say that the rock splitting in half was either caused by the spirit of Tamamo no Mei bursting free of her centuries-old prison to do evil in this world, or rainwater. I'm whenever I hear stories about the possible apocalypse, be it meteors, ancient Japanese demons, I'm all for it.
But I feel like the end of the world has been coming since the world has existed.
Right.
No, but I'm with you, Peter. It's kind of like, we get it. We
Yeah.
get this whole life thing. I got it. I get it.
Yeah.
It's
That's-
enough.
But I feel like they just need to leave the rock alone. No need to bring it into the lab and test
Well,
it. And
they
do all
did.
of
They
that.
left it alone, and one day, presumably this week, somebody hiked up to it and found it was split open. The demon had escaped. I imagine, given the world and what it is like now, the demon will soon be found trying desperately to get back in.
Yes.
Yeah.
the demon that came out was like, somebody beat me to it. already.
Exactly. It's like, oh man, I thought I was evil. Oh my God.
Tonight there's gonna be a jailbreak somewhere in this town. See, me and the boys, we don't like it.
Coming up, it's Lightning Fill in the Blank, but first it's the game where you have to listen for the rhyme. If you'd like to play on air, call or leave a message at 1-888-WAIT-WAIT. That's 1-888-924-8924, or you can click the Contact Us link on our website, waitwait.npr.org. There you can also find tickets for our upcoming show at the Harris Theater in Chicago, April 7th, with other actual human beings sitting around you. It'll be really fun. A little scary at first, but you'll get used to it. Hi, you're on Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me.
G'day, Peter. This is Hugh Lloyd Thomas, and I'm an Australian living on Nantucket Island off the coast of Massachusetts.
I'm sorry, did you just say you're living on Nantucket?
Yes, I did.
So we have a caller from Nantucket here to play the listener limerick game.
Oh my gosh, that's perfect.
Isn't it amazing? We have been
Yeah.
waiting for this moment for 24 years, sir, and I'm so glad. And how often does the whole sort of limerick thing come up in conversation when you say you're from Nantucket? That you are, in fact, I should go so far as to say, a man from Nantucket.
That is very true, but I do. I'm more modest than that, so I don't repeat the limerick too often.
All right, I appreciate that. Well, Hugh, welcome to the show. Bill Curtis is going to read you 3 news-related limericks with the last word or phrase missing from each. If you can fill in that last word or phrase correctly into the limericks, you'll be a winner. Ready to play?
I'm ready.
Let's do it. Here is your first limerick.
Fish and wildlife relations work busily. It's HR work where conflicts get sizzly. I tell ornery bears to step in, grab a chair. I solve conflicts between man and
grizzlies.
Yes, U.S. Fish and Wildlife is looking for a mediator between the humans and grizzly bear populations in Montana. The mediators won't, and let's be honest, can't stop grizzly bear attacks, but they can ensure both parties in their interactions use I statements. For example, I feel like you are eating my leg. The Bears also have hired a mediator. Oh, I'm sorry. They've hired a meat eater. Much of the role in this job, which sounds great, consists of stopping bears from eating trash in town and killing farmers' livestock, and it pays up to $100,000 a year. But unfortunately, money does not make you faster than a grizzly bear.
I would do that job.
I would too. We were so excited. We immediately looked at the actual job description, and this is true. The position is telework eligible. Can you imagine trying to mediate with a bear via Zoom?
Do they hold up a laptop to the bear's face?
I have no idea. Telework eligible, really.
Telework for the bear on Zoom.
Yeah. It's like,
excuse me, Smokey, are you on mute?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't hear you. You're on mute.
Oh, and he leaves the camera on when he goes out in the woods. It's like, oh no, Grizzly, no, don't. All right, here is your next limerick.
As we toast a successful campaign, our mutual love's unrestrained. We're drinking the bubbly and feeling quite rubbly. There's ecstasy in our...
Champagne.
Champagne, exactly right. Bottles of Moet Chandon champagne are being recalled because they're spiked with ecstasy, which means Greg's office farewell party should be a rager. Everybody, please raise your glasses and your adult pacifiers. We should point out, of course, that while Moet is a real champagne because it comes from the Champagne region of France, this is not real ecstasy because it does not come from a man with a ponytail.
I mean, I don't feel like they should be recalled. I feel like let's.
Yeah, that's like a new product
let's
category,
market that.
right?
I'm
Exactly.
into it. I will be first in line.
Yes. All right, we have one more limerick. Here it is.
On Shackleton's ill-fated trip, the ice held a perilous grip. They soon paid the cost. Their transport was lost. At last, we've found Shackleton's
ship.
Yes, his ship, Ernest Shackleton's lost ship, the Endurance, has been found off of Antarctica. And how about this? The ship sank at the beginning of the First World War and was found right at the beginning of the Third. For those of you who aren't middle-aged men who are into nautical history and sometimes think about smoking a pipe, Shackleton was an Arctic explorer whose boat got trapped in the Antarctic ice, stranding him and his crew for over a year. But here's the twist. Due to Shackleton's amazing tenacity as a leader, they all survived. Unlike certain shipwreck survivors, Shackleton made sure there was room in the door for the whole crew.
Yeah, it's an amazing story.
It is an amazing story.
There's something about shipwreck stories in general that in finding lost boats and stuff like that just, I don't know, make my ovaries shrink or something. I find it so boring.
Really?
Really? So if you were to go to Annapolis, your ovaries would all but disappear.
Yeah. Not a great place for me. And
the boat has been down there for 100 years. They just found it, and it looks great. It's like, Endurance, what's your secret? It says, well, I use a retinol night cream, and you wouldn't believe how much I moisturize. Bill, how did Hugh, the man from Nantucket, do in our Limerick challenge?
Well, the man from Nantucket won a full bucket. All three makes him a champion.
Congratulations, Hugh.
Thank you very much. Really enjoyed the show. It's really great. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for joining us. Take care.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye, Hugh.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
In a champagne supernova, a champagne supernova in the sky.
Now on to our final game with Lightning Fill in the Blank. Each of our players will have 60 seconds in which to answer as many fill-in-the-blank questions as they can. Each correct answer is now worth 2 points. Bill, can you give us the scores?
I can. Alzo has 2, Paula has 4, Nagin has 4.
Alzo, as you know, you are in third place, so that means you go first. Here we go. The clock will start when I begin your first question. Fill in the blank. While in Poland, Vice President Harris called for a war crime investigation into blank.
Putin.
Yes, Russia. On Thursday, the TSA announced that they would extend their blank until at least mid-April.
Mask mandate.
Right. After a week of criticism, the CEO of Disney said the company opposes Florida's so-called blank bill.
Don't say gay bill.
Right. This week, a wild chicken in Louisiana set up a new nest outside of blank.
The capital? I don't know.
The wild chicken set up a nest outside of Popeye's drive-thru. On Thursday, Elon Musk's space company blank launched more internet satellites into orbit.
SpaceX.
Right. According to a new report, half of U.S. adults were exposed to harmful levels of blank as kids.
Lead?
Yeah. This week, a man who was hit by a car after leaving a Florida convenience store asked the EMTs that arrived in the scene to make sure that blank.
Make sure you get my cell phone off the concrete?
No. He asked them as they tended to him lying there on the pavement to make sure that his beer was okay. The man was leaving the store with a six-pack of beer when the SUV rammed into him, threw his back inside.
Priorities.
Emergency workers said he only minor injuries, but sadly the six-pack of beer was pretty badly hurt, which is why the EMTs had to give each can mouth to mouth. Bill, how did Alzo do in our quiz?
He did very well. 5 right for 10 more points. He now has 12 and the lead.
All right, very well done. Nagin, you
Yes.
are up. Here we go. On Tuesday, the first person tried for the January 6th attack on the blank was found guilty on all counts.
Capital.
Right. On Sunday, disgraced New York Governor Blank made his first public appearance since leaving office.
Cuomo.
Right. This week, the House passed a $1.5 trillion spending bill, including aid to blank.
Ukraine.
Right. This week, President Biden had a newly discovered blank named after him.
Aviator glasses.
No, newly discovered fossilized vampire squid. This week, George R.R. Martin admitted he made almost no progress on blank in 2021.
Game of Thrones.
Yes,
sequels.
according to a report, Green Bay Packers quarterback blank is set to become the highest paid player in the history of the NFL.
Aaron Rodgers?
Yes, this week the Indianapolis Fire Department was called to a park to rescue a blank stuck in a tree.
Oh, like a kangaroo.
No, they came to rescue a boy who got stuck in the tree while trying to rescue a cat stuck in the same tree. This kid, very helpful, saw the cat high up in the tree, thought there was a route to get it. Unfortunately, he discovered it's way easier to get up than to get down, so the fire department had to be called. Thankfully, rescue workers were able to get the kid down easy, and they brought him to a local shelter to get microchipped. Bill, how did Nagin do on our quiz?
Well, she got 5 right for 10 more points, and she now has 14 and the lead.
All right, so how many then does Paula need to win this thing?
Well, 5 to tie, 6 to win.
Here we go. This is for the game, Paula. Fill in the blank. On Tuesday, the U.S. rejected Poland's offer of 28 blanks to transfer to Ukraine.
Airplanes.
Right, fighter jets. On Sunday, it was reported that the global death toll from blank had surpassed 6 million.
COVID.
Right. On Monday, the White House announced new blank standards for heavy-duty trucks.
Emissions.
Yes. This week, a screening of the new Batman movie in Texas was interrupted by blank.
Somebody let a bat out.
Yeah, in the theater. On Tuesday, the governor of New Mexico signed a bill making in-state blank free.
Water parks.
College tuition. One day after having to call 911 to rescue him while hiking on a trail in Arizona, a man blanked.
He rescued 911.
No, he had to call 911 to rescue him again from the very same trail.
Oh, boy.
First time this guy attempted this trail, he got lost immediately when the sun went down, and rescuers berated him for going out without the right gear.
Yeah.
They also told him to wait a few months for it to warm up to try the trail again. So obviously he got up the next day, hit the exact same trail at the exact same time, and had to be rescued again. You know the old saying, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, I do not know how to hike. Bill, did Paula do well enough to win?
Well, she had 4 right for 8 more points, total of 12. That means with 14, Nagin is this week's champion.
Whoa, Nagin, whoa! In just a minute, we're going to ask our panelists to predict how the giant parachuting spiders will, in fact, improve our lives. But first, let me tell you that support for NPR comes from NPR stations and DuckDuckGo, committed to making privacy online simple. Used by tens of millions, they offer internet privacy with one download. DuckDuckGo, privacy simplified at duckduckgo.com. Indeed, a hiring platform for helping businesses attract, screen, and interview candidates they need to
Look
fill
at that.
all of
Free
them.
advertising
More
right
at
from my
indeed.com/NPR.
podcast.
And the NPR Wine Club, bringing the wine world to people's homes with wines inspired by NPR, like Planet Money Cabernet Sauvignon. Available to adults 21 years or older at nprwineclub.org. Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me is a production of NPR and WBEZ Chicago in association with the Urgent Haircut Productions, Doug Berman, Benevolent Overlord. Philip Goedeke writes our limericks. Our tour manager is Shayna Donald. BJ Liederman composed our theme. Our program is produced by Jennifer Mills, Miles Dornbos, Lillian King, and Nancy Seychow. Our production assistant is Sophie Hernandez-Simonidis. Special thanks to Vinnie Thomas. Peter Gwynn is our palm-sized parachuting producer. Technical direction is from Lorna White. Our CFO is Colin Miller. Our production manager is birthday boy Robert Newhouse. The executive producer of Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me, and not an Hermes brand ambassador, is Mike Danforth. Now, panel, how will the giant parachuting spiders make our lives better? Nagin Farsad.
Oh, the spiders will land in America and they'll teach us how to love again.
Also Slade.
Whenever someone refuses to pick up after their dog, a giant spider stealthily descends from the sky, wraps the poo in a web, and attaches it to the owner.
That's elaborate. Yeah. Paula Poundstone.
It'll take our mind off the nukes.
Well, if any of that happens, panel, we're going to ask you about it on Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me.
Thank you, Bill Curtis. Thanks also to Nagin Farsad, Alzo Slade, and Paula Poundstone. Thanks to all of you for listening. I'm Peter Sagal. We'll see you next week. This is NPR.
WNYC is supported by Charles P. Rogers, bed
On to
makers in New
Radio Lab.
York for 7 generations, with retail locations at 17th Street in Manhattan and Route 17, New Jersey, featuring the Estate 5000 mattress. More at charlesprogers.com.
It's WNYC New York. I'm David First. Radio Lab is coming up next. Today, find out how much the body and brain can endure. It's a journey to the edge of human limits, one I will be taking while sitting comfortably listening to the show. To increase the variety of voices and news sources you hear on WNYC, we're expanding the number of BBC top-of-the-hour newscasts heard throughout the day. Stay with us for continuing updates on the war in Ukraine and in-depth coverage from the BBC and NPR, starting at 4 o'clock here on WNYC.
This is WNYC, FM, HD, and AM New York.
Wait, you're listening?
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
All right.
You're
Listening
to Radio Lab.
Radio Lab.
From
WNYC.
See?
Yep.
Who's the gentleman we're on the air with?
Oh, there's going to be two of us. So one of them is named
Whoa.
Jad. That's not me. His name is Jad, like his parents call him Jad.
Jad?
So we're going to begin the show with this delightful duo.
I'm Julie.
Julie Moss,
I'm Wendy.
Wendy Ingram. Hi, Julie. Hi, Wendy.
Hi, Jad.
They've been friends for a really long time.
Remember that one time you bought all that?
Everything in a tube.
They both like to travel. They both like to shop. And they both like to run really long distances until they collapse, usually in front of millions of people. Now, Wendy
Wendy was a classic athlete from day one.
was apparently born this way.
Her mother tells me how she had to channel her energy into sports.
Yeah. I always considered myself a science project.
What do you mean?
We've been created. We have hands, feet. We have a mind. We have lungs. We have a heart. Let's see what it can do.
Wendy, we're very opposite in that respect.
Julie is an entirely different story, and we're going to tell you that story in just a moment. But first, we should say this is Radio Lab. I'm Jad Abumrad.
And I'm Robert Krulwich.
Our topic today is limits. Limits of
the body. Start there.
Then the limits of the brain.
And finally, the limits of what we can know about everything.
Julie, how did you get interested in this race that you're about to tell us about? Was it like
an impulse or something?
Well, no, it was a requirement to graduate.
Oh.
I had to do it's called a senior project. I went to Cal Poly San Luis Obispo in California, and I was a PE major, which now I
like phys ed, you mean?
Yeah, and that was just by default. I was a California surfer girl. I started surfing at 14. But I needed a senior project, and there I was in 1981 watching TV instead of studying. And on comes ABC Wild World of Sports.
Brought to you by Anheuser-Busch Natural Light.
The Iron Man from Hawaii. And I watched it, and it just sucked me in.
This must have been like really early Iron Man.
Oh, yeah, I think it was the fourth one. And I thought, it's in Hawaii, it's great. I know my mom will pay for it because I have to do this project for school. And so I started doing research on it.
And this, just so we know, this is you swim, you bike, you run. That's the order?
You swim 2.4 miles, you ride 112 miles, and then you run a marathon.
Wow.
So it was...
But wait a second, though.
Go ahead.
That seems like a major decision to want to go 140. I mean, were you a triathlete type person at that point in your life? Had you ran a marathon before?
It was conceptual. Those were just the distances. Those were numbers. That wasn't reality. It was just, you were in Hawaii. By the time I got off the plane to do the Ironman, I still hadn't completed the total distance that I'd need to do on the bike or the swim.
Oh, my God.
Wow.
But I wasn't going over there to be competitive. I was going over there to do this event, have fun in Hawaii, and then I'll write up some sort of bogus, physiological consequences or something. But I really just, I thought I was taking the easy way out.
When you got off the bus or you walked into the room where the other ones were, did you suddenly think, uh-oh?
Yeah, I mean, people were taking it very seriously. People had coordinated outfits, and I thought, I'm feeling a little like the country mouse, So I think when race day rolled around, it was sort of my day to get through and never do again. I mean, this is a one-time thing.
So shall we run the race?
Yeah, so, okay, you do the first 2 legs, the swimming and then the biking.
I'm doing really well. You see me on the bike. I'm riding along. I mean, from the old coverage of ABC, I'm smiling at the camera. I'm certainly not in an aerodynamic position. Why would you want to be all crouched over when you could be sitting up smiling?
That was your beauty queen turn? You're going, hello!
I was doing parade waves. I really was. Loving the attention. And I had a Snickers bar early on the bike ride, and I keep thinking, if I'd only eaten that Snickers bar instead of throwing it away. ABC came up on a camera, and there I was trying to open this melted Snickers bar with my teeth, and all of a sudden there's a camera, and it's like, oh my gosh, I don't want to be messy on national TV, so I ditched this beautiful Snickers bar, and yeah.
Okay, skipping to the 3rd leg of the race. Julie's through the swim. She's through the 112-mile bike ride. Onto the marathon.
I came off the bike. They told me there's a woman ahead of you. And she was a top-notch cyclist.
Oh, so you were in 2nd place.
Yeah.
Whoa. How did that happen?
I was doing really well, and I started on the run. And the one gal who had a great bike ride had an Achilles injury. And sure enough, I think about 8 miles or so, I caught her. And there I am in the lead.
Wow.
And all of a sudden, it was a little... things started to shift. I'm good at something.
Yeah.
And somebody's trying to take it away from me. And that was the woman who was in 2nd place, Kathleen McCartney. And even though she was a mile away, it felt like she was breathing down my neck and trying to take something that now I was becoming very attached to. I was also starting to fall apart physically.
What were those early signs?
Cramping. And a feeling that you weren't digesting your food, that everything was sort of sitting there sloshing around. Wendy's laughing. This is a serious moment, and she's laughing about it. It's like,
In any case, finally Julie makes it to the last little itty-bitty stretch of the race.
Probably about 400 meters from the finish.
And she's still in 1st place. So, Julie, let's do this. I'm actually, as we're talking, I'm watching you on YouTube.
Oh, stinker.
Well, I just want you to take me into your head in these final moments, because it's just like it's unwatchable, but you can't turn away.
Yeah, it's a train wreck.
So I'm looking at you now, and you're running, and it's dark.
Mm-hmm.
There's people like on both sides cheering you.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're running, then you're slowing down, then you're really slowing down.
Mm-hmm.
And you're walking a little bit like you're on stilts. And then, like right here, your legs give out.
They give out. And I couldn't get back up. I mean, I thought, get up, and my legs wouldn't work. So I sort of laid there on the ground, and I figured out if I put my arms in front of me and leaned on my arms, they would sort of form like a tripod, and I could sort of lean on my arms and kind of got one leg up and kind of staggered to a walk and started walking again.
All right, now you're walking again, but you're like...
drunk monkey.
Yeah, really wobbly.
Yeah.
Now, all this time, you're conscious that number 2 is getting closer and closer? Are you conscious of her at all?
Oh, yeah. And I had to keep finding a way to keep going, and my thought was, this is mine.
Oh, you just fell again.
Oh, yeah.
See, this is the one that gets me right here. You fall down, and your arms go back. It's like you're dying.
Yeah. And, as I was putting one hand in front of the other, I saw this pair of tennies go by and these legs, and I thought, that's her. She's gone by me. And it was just, I just thought, I quit. I just thought, I can't say it on National Public Radio, but F it.
Yeah.
F it. And all of a sudden, there's this voice that just said, get up. Get up. just keep moving forward. I could see the finish line about 10 feet in front of me, and I thought, get up. I can't get up again. I'd get up. Do not think I've sort of worn out that tactic. Get up. But I can crawl.
Nobody will help me with this. Oh my gosh.
And I crawl. And so here I am coming along, and the TV camera lights are blinding me, and no one's helping her. My life was going to be different. I mean, I felt my life changing. I made a deal with myself. A deal was struck. And I don't care if it hurts. I don't care if it's messy. I don't care how it looks. I would finish. I would finish.
So Julie Moss crawls the last 10 feet of the race, literally an inch at a time. And that whole time, the cameras are on her, and they capture everything. And I mean everything.
Yeah. I pooped my pants on national TV. It doesn't get more shameful from that. Wendy teases me all the time. You know, you were a chocolate mess from, one way or the other.
You can get up here and do this next thing.
Yeah, but it was a pivotal moment in my life.
And to this day, Julie says, the person she is now, it all began with
that voice that I hadn't ever called upon. That just said, keep moving forward.
But that's the thing that gets to me, is like, it didn't say to you, you can't. It actually said exactly the opposite.
Isn't that cool?
I would have thought it would have said, stop. Come on, stop. Lie down.
That's what you look
Lie
like.
down.
Lie down. Lie
No,
down.
that's your
Enough.
That's your ego. That's your ego that will come in and sabotage your real self. There is no limit. I really believe that.
You do?
And I absolutely do.
No limit.
Nope. Nope. Nope.
Yeah.
No.
Let's take seriously what Julie Moss just said, that there are no limits. I think she meant psychologically, but I mean,
yes, I mean, there are obviously limits if she...
Well, yes, but...
She could die.
You could die.
Yeah.
But short of that, you would say it is her muscles that are determining the limits, right?
Exactly. And the cell, your muscle cell.
Yeah, let's just question that for a second. Let me introduce you to a guy. His name is David Jones.
Hi.
It's him. He's a retired physiologist.
At Metropolitan University.
And he's got a slight condition that interferes with his speech, just so you know.
Okay.
Anyways, he did a study, which I completely, find mind-blowing. Although it's a hard study to summarize, but I'm going to try. Okay, so he does a study where he puts a bunch of bikers on bikes and he has them pedal a lot.
It's about 40 kilometers.
Long distance.
Yeah.
Now, he's got two groups. Each group gets an energy drink, which they sort of have to drink
while biking,
except that they don't drink it. The rule is they don't actually drink it. They just swish it in their mouth.
And spit it out.
Swish and spit.
That's right. That's what they do. Swish, spit, bike. Swish, spit, bike.
Well, wouldn't want to be the towel guy in this particular experiment.
Well, apparently they have scientists with buckets who just stand next to them.
And they spit into the bucket.
Okay.
So half the people get real energy drink to swish and spit.
Yep.
Half the people get fake energy drink to swish and spit.
And they both taste the same.
And nobody knows who's getting what. So you would think in this scenario that nobody should get any benefit from this because no one's actually drinking the drink. Nothing's getting into the body.
Mm-hmm.
Or let's say the taste creates a placebo effect. Well, then everybody should get the placebo effect equally.
Everybody should get it.
But here's the thing. Only the people who swished, not drank, but swished the real energy drink got a boost.
Oh.
How much of a boost?
It's a minute or a couple of minutes.
Whoa, that's a lot.
Yeah, a minute. That's the difference between finishing first and last.
Yeah.
So let me think here, but don't say anything for a minute. Let me just think about this. So maybe something in the first set of athletes who got the real drink, something inside them knew something.
Yeah. Here's the big theory. You want the little theory or the big one first?
Well, I'd like the big theory briefly.
Okay, the big one, briefly. There's an idea that's been floating around for a while called the central governor theory, which is that inside your head there's this little circuit, which you're starting to see on brain scans. There's this little circuit that governs your energy supply. And when it feels like you're in danger of running low, it'll trigger signals of pain be sent to your body to try and get you to rest. Now, what scientists are finding is that this governor circuit is really conservative. It'll send you pain to try and get you to stop way before you are out of juice.
So if you were a fuel tank, they would flash E for empty.
But you got a quarter tank left. So what might be happening with these bikers is that the sugar is landing on their tongue. The tongue sees the sugar, sends a message to the brain, and the governor sees this message and thinks, oh, if we're about to get some energy, well then I guess it's okay for you to spend some energy. Let me just give you some from my secret stash over here. So you feel a boost.
So the conjecture here is you have a reservoir of extra stuff, but it is so deeply disguised that you can't even know that it's there.
Exactly. And to skip to the punchline, when you feel tired, Mr. K, not just tired, when you are dead.
Spent.
When you are spent.
Yeah.
Which does not feel like a subjective thing at all. That feels like an objective reality. You are done. Well, in fact, at that moment, maybe you're not. Maybe you're just feeling the effects of that little governor lying to you.
Oh.
Which raises the question, what if you could lie back to her? Then how far could you go? So, with all that in mind, we're going to kick it up a notch. Let me tell you about this competition called the Ride Across America.
It is basically, it's an insane event.
We heard about this first from a reporter named Daniel Coyle.
You get on a bike in California and you bike across the country, 3,000 miles, the equivalent of 4 Mount Everests, and they don't sleep.
At all?
No, they will sleep. They'll sleep an hour a day, 2 hours a day.
An hour a day?
Yeah. It's a race that is designed to reveal what human limits are.
Who does it? Can you describe the kinds of people who are attracted to this?
No, I think they come from all walks of life. They come from all over the globe. It's a really interesting cross-section.
We actually got curious about this, so we sent our producer Lulu Miller to track down a few of these guys.
2 guys.
Who'd you find?
Well, the first one.
Yes.
His name is Patrick.
Patrick Autissier. I'm 47 years old, from France.
He's the rookie. Had you done any kind of long-distance cycling before?
No, not at all.
He's actually a scientist.
Biologist, yeah.
Got a wife, 2 kids.
Okay.
And then we've got the champion.
Okay, hello, Yuri's here.
So this is Yuri Robic.
Hello.
He's won this thing 4 times.
On the back, he's a killer.
My body, I can go also in the rain or cold or the heat.
His job is he's a soldier.
Employed by a Slovenian army. What else? What would you like to know?
Okay, 2005.
So it's the start was at 7 a.m. in San Diego. Start at 9.
You're gonna win this year?
Is it like 20 people or 100 people?
25, I think.
So the tape you're hearing right now is actual footage from that day. Turned out the year he did it, there was actually a film crew there following every single rider.
And so I was, really scared. Scared at him.
Not Yuri, though.
No.
He's just in front of Patrick.
I'm really, how to say in English, I'm really sure in myself.
4, 3, 2, 1.
Then the race is on.
It's easy. You just start your engine and go.
But for me, since I didn't know what to expect, I was riding very conservatively. At the back of the pack.
14 states, 3,000 miles to go.
They don't go very fast. They'll cross the country going about 13, 14 miles an hour, which any 11-year-old could ride for a time. The difference is that they just don't stop.
7 hours later, California desert.
It's really hot.
My watch says 109 degrees. We're in the shade in the car.
This is Steve Towdy, the camera guy following Patrick in a van.
Patrick's out here climbing a hill.
I've never experienced this kind of temperature. 110 Fahrenheit.
Then, 150 miles later.
Arizona. Rolling hills, sunset.
200 miles. 300 miles.
Then the sun is rising.
400 miles. 500 miles.
Utah. It's still very hot.
And then?
Colorado. The mountains, the big mountains.
Yuri's in the lead. He's just crested the top of a 12-mile climb.
It was during the middle of the night. It was raining, really heavy rain.
He begins to coast downward.
Descending without pedaling. And after 2 kilometers, I was completely frozen, shaking like I was electric.
Your butt is like a hamburger.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all red. You don't have any skin at all.
I mean, the bike is the most efficient machine for creating suffering ever invented. The pressure's on your hands. The pressure is on your neck.
This is this British guy named Chris Hopkinson, halfway through the race, and his neck has just given out.
People whose necks have given out will take duct tape and literally tie their heads up. They'll put a cord to the back of their helmet and then pin it, say to their belt.
Jesus, God.
So that they can look, because they can no longer hold their heads up.
Oh, God. The pain is like waves, you know? And I don't know why it's that, but it is. It's like waves. It's coming and it's going. It's coming and it's going.
So Lulu, is assuming that the central governor circuits inside the heads of all these riders are creating those waves of pain.
Yeah.
How do they soldier on? How do they ignore it?
Well, I asked them that, and they each sort of have different techniques. So Patrick, he'll just start shouting back at it.
Literally.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And Yuri, well, he gets his crew to come up alongside him and blare Slovenian war songs.
To the speakers, yeah, very loudly.
Is that what we're hearing?
It is. This is him on his bike during the race, singing along. And all of this works for a while. But then they hit the halfway point.
Kansas. I don't know if you've been to Kansas,
Never,
but don't
no.
live there. It's awful.
The scenery gets really monotonous.
Then you don't have any sightseeing, nothing.
And more than that, they've gone over 1,000 miles without sleeping, basically.
And that's where we see the sort of really interesting stuff start to happen. If you've done everything, if you've handled the heat and hydration, if your infrastructure is solid, all the stress goes to the last point, which is the mind.
It came very suddenly. It was dark. We were in a forest. And very quickly, the environment got very aggressive.
He said he saw shadows running across the road. It looked like the trees were trying to reach out to get him.
I was starting to have nightmares, but I was awake.
These kinds of hallucinations are just a fact of the race.
People seeing secret code in the cracks of the road, riders jumping off their bikes to square off and fight mailboxes.
And it's what breaks a lot of people.
Yeah.
But strangely, these kinds of hallucinations might be the very key to Yuri's success.
I saw everything. I mean, a lot of like monsters, like zombies. He's gonna attack you, you know.
And why would that help him?
Well,
To me, it was really,
think
really,
about
yeah.
why the central governor is in place.
The system that's designed to always keep an emergency stash of energy there for you, should you ever need it.
So those feelings of pain are really just a way of safeguarding that last
Little stash of energy that you could use if you absolutely had to.
Yeah, like if your life was on the line or something.
That's right.
But what if you are convinced, and therefore your central governor was convinced, that your life really was on the line? That year when Yuri got to Ohio,
He hallucinated that there were horsemen chasing him.
Yeah. With the gun, with the shotgun, and I said to my crew chief, hey, they are shooting us. Come on, do something. We are soldiers. Do something to this guy. They are attacking us.
The interesting thing about that is the way in which his team sees him hallucinating, and their reaction is, oh yeah, we see him too.
Come on, Yuri, you might escape.
Wait, why?
Because
they're gaining on us.
They're gaining on us.
It's funny, you know, but for me it was not funny.
They will use his hallucination as fuel, and they make no bones about it.
And when you see that,
that's Matyas Planinchek, Yuri's crew chief.
when you see him riding that fast after 5-6 days, almost dying on the bike, and then suddenly he explodes, your hair on your arm will go up, on your neck will go up, and then you know that's why you are there, because you don't want to miss that moment, because this is something out of this world.
Yuri says that during the hallucinations,
I mean, the pain is gone.
but the trade-off is that when he watches videos of himself like this, punching mailboxes and throwing his bike into a ditch, he says it's actually painful to watch.
You know, it's really tough for me to looking myself in these videos, in these films. How my behavior is going.
The reality is, he's looking at a madman.
It's not me. That's not me.
Yeah.
See, now I'm thinking, like, Daniel, like, if madness is the key, right, to tricking your central governor into giving you access to that energy, does that mean that if Robert and I went mad in that particular way, that we would suddenly be really athletic? I mean, are there actually seriously cases like that?
Well, there was actually in the early 1900s, there was a doctor named Auguste Bier who noticed a mental patient making a leap in an asylum, and he measured the leap, and it compared rather favorably to the world record at the time.
What?
Yeah. And he was one of the early sort of propagators of this governor theory, that obviously this patient from whom all the sort of governors have been lifted was capable of a feat of astounding strength.
All right, so Lulu, what happened at the end of the race?
Well,
From Slovenia,
Yuri wins.
Yuri Robeck.
I won the Ram. That's something.
And what about Patrick?
Well, let's rewind a couple days. He's just crossed the halfway point in Mount Vernon, Kansas, and he decides to hop off his bike, take a quick break. And he's in the van. He checks his email.
Just to give me some motivation.
And he sees an email from one of his friends.
He said, "We're so sad that the Dr. Breedlove accident."
Patrick had no idea what this guy was talking about, but it appeared to suggest that one of the 25 riders, a guy named Dr. Bob Breedlove, had just been hurt.
And so I asked one of my crew members, what happened with Dr. Breedlove? And he said, well, he got an accident and he died.
During the race?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so when he told me this, I mean, immediately not only shocked, but I was done.
I understand, Patrick. I feel bad too. Obviously, I feel bad.
And so
It's happened.
Steve, today the cameraman, tried to push me.
But it would be pointless to stop here, where you have a wide shoulder, a van right behind you.
Who's going to call Anne-Cécile and tell her, sorry, but Patrick just fell down the road, and so he's hospitalized, or even worse. I have kids and a wife, and I went too far on this race.
I understand, Patrick, but how far to the next time station? Why don't we go there?
No,
take
I'm
another...
dead. I don't want to continue that. That's okay. I don't want to continue that.
I'm just saying, let's not throw in the towel just yet.
So after that, I mean, I started riding again, but for them.
Yeah.
It was a magical night. It was very, very warm, a beautiful night. No clouds, nothing.
And as always, his crew is cheering him on, trying to pump him up.
You're strong! Patrick, can I ask you why you're doing this? What? Can I ask you a question? Or don't you want to talk? Why are you doing this?
But he's not saying anything back. For hours. And then, around 1 in the morning, Patrick says his mind just goes quiet.
Completely silent.
Out of that silence, he said he heard a voice that said simply,
You stop. Stop. And so that's what I did. I said, I'm done.
You done? Why?
I'm done with the race. I'm done. You asked me a question earlier, remember? Why I was doing that.
Yeah, why are you doing it?
Because I just wanted to test my limit. Physical limit and mental. And I touched twice this limit. Yesterday morning and this morning. And I don't want to live that again. And I quit. That's it.
Huh. I'm trying to figure out who I would honor more.
Yeah.
The winner of the race or the man who insisted on losing.
I'm 40. I've got kids. I identified more with the guy who stopped.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think also you see the guy who wins, and it makes you ask big questions about what's possible.
Oh, Dan, what do you think?
I find myself looking at both of them kind of with my jaw on the floor.
Daniel Coyle's latest book is called The Talent Code. And thanks, Lulu.
Yeah, and a huge thanks to Stephen Auerbach, who made the film Bicycle Dreams. That's where all this footage came from. And I need to take a moment to add that Yuri Robic died a few months after we first released this show in a bicycle accident. You can find a remembrance of him on this episode's page on radiolab.org.
Hi, this is Laura Huck from Kitchener, Ontario. Radiolab is supported by Nature Plus, a flexible monthly subscription that grants immediate online access to the science journal Nature and the entire Nature portfolio of over 50 journals. More information at go.nature.com/radiolab.
Hello, this is Lisa, and I'm calling from Germany. Radiolab is supported by Indeed, with Instant Match, a hiring tool instantly delivering to businesses a list of candidates whose resumes on Indeed match the job description. Learn more at indeed.com/credit.
Kremlin-produced propaganda has Russia in a stranglehold.
When you confront people with these horrific images of cities like Kharkiv, which looks exactly like my neighborhood in Moscow, they will just repeat what the state propaganda is telling them, that there is no war.
Also, a Ukrainian gamer navigates to safety using skills he learned online on this week's On the Media from WNYC. Tomorrow morning at 10 on 93.9 FM WNYC.
WNYC supporters include Town Hall, presenting audio storytellers Ira Glass and Jad Abumrad on stage together for an evening of inside investigation and humanity, Saturday, April 30th at 8 p.m. More information at thetownhall.org. The Met, now on view, Jacques-Louis David, radical draftsman. Drawings and sketches reveal the creative process behind David's iconic paintings. Learn more at metmuseum.org.
That mystery meat of indeterminate origin? Turns out it has quite the backstory. On the next Planet Money, the spam labor strike that threatened to tear one small town apart. And on How I Built This, Miguel McKelvey tells us about the rise and fall of the co-working company he helped found, WeWork. That's on the next How I Built This and Planet Money from NPR.
Today at 3 on 93.9 FM and AM 820, WNYC.
This is WNYC, 93.9 FM and AM 820, NPR News and the New York Conversation.
Hey, I'm Jad Abumrad.
And I'm Robert Krulwich.
This is Radiolab. Today, our topic is limits.
So let's go uptown
to
the limits of the brain. To tackle just a piece of that question, let's just take a look at memory.
Okay. All right.
Great. And we're going to do that by telling a story.
A story that we heard from Jonah Lehrer.
And the story begins in a small town in the old Soviet Union back in the 1920s.
And it's about a newspaper reporter named Mr. S. At least that's what we're going to call him.
Yeah, so Mr. S is a newspaper reporter, and one day his boss starts yelling at him because his boss gives out these assignments, talks to the whole newsroom, and he notices that S never takes notes. And this drives his boss crazy because his boss is, saying all these things they have to report on, and Mr. S just never writes them down. And so his boss calls him to his office and says, "Are you lazy? Do you not take this job seriously?" And Mr. S responds, "Well, I just remember it all."
And the editor says, "Come on." And he sort of quizzes him. He says, "What did I assign you yesterday?"
His boss gives him this quiz. And sure enough, he remembers everything.
He remembers everything the editor said word for word. And the editor's thinking, I don't know what's wrong with this guy. I mean, he's not a great reporter, but he has something going on in his head. So he decides to send him to a famous medical doctor in Moscow, A.R. Luria. Who is Luria?
Luria, Luria is a classical figure in neuropsychology and in psychology in general.
And who is this?
Tell us your name.
Elhaddad Goldberg. I'm a clinical professor at NYU Medical School.
Goldberg knew Luria.
Luria was my mentor. I worked very closely with him.
Not only was he a student of Luria,
Yes.
Luria gave him a present once.
This is this book. The book about the original book about Mr. S.
This book is one of the great works of early neuroscience.
Given me by Luria. That's him, yeah.
Oh, so we're going to the right guy. You have an autographed copy by the guy. It is a beautiful and almost novelistic description of what happened to Mr. S.
And the original title was A Little Book About Big Memory.
Okay, so Jonah, this guy, Mr. S, goes to this psychologist, Luria. Now, what does Luria do with him?
Luria, during the book, talks about how he wrote random numbers on a blackboard.
Numbers like 1, 8, 6, 4, 3, about 50 numbers.
And asked Mr. S to remember them.
Okay, here we are on page 16. S would study the material on the board.
For about 3 minutes.
Close his eyes, open them again for a moment.
Okay, done.
And with that, he would reel off the series precisely 6, 6, 8, 0, 4, 2, 1, 8, 7, 2, 7, 8, 4.
Wow, that's like a superpower.
Yeah, and this impresses Luria. He says.
So he takes it up to the next level.
Then Luria gives him, this incredible assortment of memory tasks. Everything from memorize Dante's Inferno to
memorize Dante's Inferno, the whole thing?
No.
Well, not the whole thing, just opening stanzas.
Nel mezzo del cammin di nostra vita mi ritrovai per una selva oscura.
But here's the really weird thing. Mr. S does not read Italian, speak Italian. He had no idea what he was talking about.
La diritta via era smarrita.
And yet the thing he memorizes, he gets word perfect.
Yeah.
And not only that, he was tested 15 years after he'd memorized those stanzas, and he still got it right.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
He remembered everything. He had
When you say everything, what do you mean by that?
I mean everything, okay? So if suppose he interviewed you 10 years ago, he would have remembered the color of your sweater, whether you held the mic in the left hand or in the right hand, he would have remembered everything. I mean everything.
Luria never talks about a computational limit on Mr. S's memory.
As an experimenter, I soon found myself in a state verging on utter confusion. And I simply had to admit that the capacity of his memory had no distinct limits.
How can there be no limits? Because I'm thinking about the size of a normal head. It's like 50 centimeters or something in diameter. The brain is 3 pounds. It's a very confined little situation. How could there be no limits?
I wish there was a good answer. Nobody has any idea why it is he had this infinite capability for recall. What it does suggest, though, is that the brain has a capability to store an incredible amount of stuff.
How much stuff, though? How much can you jam into a human brain?
We're going to change locations from Russia 1920s to, you ready for this? London, 2009. Here we are at the World Memory Championships.
The World what?
The World Memory Championships. Just go with me for a second.
Okay.
So we're in a hotel in central London. The lobby is crowded with the world's best memorizers.
So what was your name?
You got people here from like Oman.
Kranti Raj. I'm Dr. Kranti.
Manchester.
Hello, I'm Emil Hawk.
Netherlands.
Yeah, Rick de Jong.
You even have a team of Chinese girls in the corner doing a cheer.
And what are we doing here?
Well, the people here are a little bit like the guy you were describing, Mr. S. They are walking experiments in brain stuffing.
Could you start by introducing yourself?
Okay.
Like, take this guy.
I'm Ben Fidmore. I'm the reigning world memory champion. I'm 33 years old and I live in Nottingham.
Ben can take a string of numbers that is 1,400 numbers long.
Random numbers.
Random numbers. And he can commit it to memory instantly. Yeah.
We've not actually reached, any kind of upper limit of what it's possible to memorise yet. Everybody's still consistently improving.
So here's what we did. We found a guy.
My name's Ronnie White, and I'm the 2009 USA Memory Champion.
He's a Navy reservist from Dallas, Texas.
Matter of fact, I had to get permission from my unit to come here.
And we followed him around the competition.
What's about to happen?
Well, the competition's about to start. It's day one. It should be a fun day.
Because we wanted to know, how do you do it? How do you take the limits of a normal brain and completely shatter them?
So I walked in the room that day wearing my Michael Phelps t-shirt. It said USA on the front.
Okay, your 1 minute of mental preparation time starts now.
The final minutes before you start an event, you're sitting in your chair and you're just collecting your thoughts. I put on my military glasses. I got some, they look like Drew Carey's glasses, and I put those on to remind me, hey, remain calm. You know, I wore those all throughout my tour in Afghanistan, and if you're going down a road and you're needing to be on the lookout for IEDs, but you're not calm, you're nervous and jittery, you could die. Then I'll put on some noise-canceling headsets. Then I just close my eyes, sit in my chair.
10 seconds. Neurons on the ready.
Neurons on the ready, they say.
Go.
And at that moment, 60 people turn over papers. On these pieces of paper are numbers.
6, 7, 1.
Nothing but numbers. Numbers forever.
And what are they doing?
Well, they have to memorize them.
So they're just you're seeing all these people staring at pieces of paper?
Yeah, absolute silence. Heads down, 60 heads down, staring at numbers.
6, 7.
But here's the interesting thing. In their heads,
3.
They're not seeing numbers.
4.
Instead, those numbers are turning into
8.
George Bush,
4,
Florence Nightingale,
1,
Randy Richardson, he's a friend,
1,
Barney Fife,
6,
Rash,
8,
Michael Jordan,
2,
Chuck Norris,
6,
Donnie Brasco,
2, 5,
my friend Ronnie,
4,
King Tut.
6,
I have a person assigned to every number from 0 to 99.
8.
And then I have a verb assigned to every person from 0 to 99. And then I have a noun assigned to every digit. So you're just taking person, verbs, and objects.
Self-memorization. Please put the cards down.
And you're putting them all together, and they really don't make sense.
What were some of the things? Give me an example.
The images I saw?
Yeah.
I saw Albert Einstein riding a roller coaster into a bunch of fog.
5, 9, 3, 7, 8, 7.
That was one of the images. I saw Fat Albert, cartoon character, driving a car.
8, 1, 9, 9.
So there seems
Stuff
to be
like that.
something about turning data into pictures that makes that data etch.
It becomes easier to hold on to.
Do you have any idea why?
I don't know. I would just be purely speculating here. But the visual cortex has been hugely enhanced in human evolution. It's the rear half of our brain. Because we know that memories, there is no memory center of the brain. It's distributed in our sensory areas. It might make a little sense that given that we've got this huge chunk of visual cortex, that it's easier to store memory there.
Okay, so let me ask you, how did Ron's visual cortex do in the big contest?
Well, Ron didn't actually do so well.
He didn't?
Mm-mm. He was trying to memorize these 12 decks of cards, and he had constructed this whole stack of pictures, but he did them in the wrong order and he screwed it up.
He lost?
He lost really badly, unfortunately.
I was shocked. I mean, I was just shocked. That knocked me out of any possible.
You know who, by the way, who didn't lose? Remember Mr. S, the guy we started this conversation with?
Yeah, sure.
This is interesting. It turns out that Mr. S also had little pictures and little characters running around in his mind. But unlike Ron,
he was born that way. He had this tremendous memory without any effort and without any mnemonic techniques. This is the point.
You mean his mind made the pictures automatically?
Yeah.
Mr. S had a condition called synesthesia, where your senses get kind of tangled up.
So he heard voices in terms of colors.
Right. Colors of voices.
Textures.
Smells of words.
And his numbers weren't just numbers. Sometimes he imagines walking through a crowded Moscow street and the numbers are scattered along the way. And so he describes how I'm walking down the street, there's the number 1.
This is a proud, well-built man.
Then I make a right turn onto the side street, there's the number
2 is a high-spirited woman.
Then I make a left turn, there's the number
3, a gloomy person. Why? I don't know.
Nobody knows. Nobody knows exactly what accounts for the individual associations of synesthesia. They just exist. But they're this extra scaffold for Mr. S's memory to cling to.
Wow, so he's like Ron, except he's using all his senses to remember numbers.
Exactly.
So, getting back to the plot, what did he do with this talent?
He became a traveling circus freak, basically. He gave up journalism to perform for crowds.
Just imagine it went something, I don't know, like this.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the
captain of cognition, the master of memory, the spectacular Shereshevsky.
Imagine this is a big crowd. He walks onto the stage. He gives them an invitation. He asks them to
shout random numbers.
58,
25, 257, 540,
45,
52,
203.
Then, after a little while, the crowd quiets down. And Mr. S would close his eyes and step forward.
And he would remember them all.
This was his job?
Yeah. And it wasn't just numbers, by the way. He was thrown weird phrases, nonsense sounds, nouns, verbs, and sometimes he'd do 4 shows a day. And the more he did, the more obvious it became that this business of his, it had a downside. Here's where we're going to finally reach maybe the limits question that we're really examining in this program. He would hear all these nonsense phrases being thrown at him, and they would build up in his mind.
And it's important to note this was incredibly frustrating for Mr. S.
He had a constant stream of memories pouring into his brain. He couldn't get any of it out. And on top of that, as they piled up, the memories began to kind of mush together. One would trigger another, and then another, and then another.
It was this suffocating web of association.
The moment he encountered anything, everything, even the remotely related in his past to that something, was immediately evoked in his memory.
For example, let's suppose a man in the audience stands up and he shouts out the word dog. For a split second, Mr. S sees a dog, which suggests another dog, and then another dog, and then
every dog he ever saw.
And the man suggests not just that man, but the man beside him, and other men, and men that he knew. And
all the other competitions where a similar-looking man stood up and shouted something similar.
He was barraged, he was deluged with all kinds of memories, totally unrelated. Everything layered, one layered on top of the other.
Well, that's horrible.
I agree.
Oh.
That would be a bloody nightmare.
The mind isn't just interested in storing information. It really wants to be able to get meaning out of that information, out of those memories. And that actually seems to be turned off, to be inhibited by remembering too much.
If you remember too much, you will make no sense of the world.
It's weird. I've never actually thought of making sense of the world as being an act of negation.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
It's very much that.
But it kind of makes sense, because if you think about, like, living here in New York City, all the people you bump into, if you remembered every freaking one, like, you wouldn't be able to have a relationship with your wife or your husband or your child, because they'd just be lost in this thick crowd in your head. Just like, get them out.
Somehow that's the balance. The act of forgetting is crucial to create preciousness.
Hi, my name is Laura Lee. I'm 8 years old and I'm calling from Westchester, New York. Radiolab is supported by Indeed with Instant Match, a hiring tool instantly delivering to business a list of candidates whose resumes on Indeed match the job description. Learn more at Indeed.com/credit.
Hi, this is Rebecca. And this is Gigi, and we're calling in from Washington, D.C. Radiolab is supported by Progressive Insurance. Listeners can protect everything under one roof by bundling home and auto. More at Progressive.com or 1-800-PROGRESSIVE.
That mystery meat of indeterminate origin? Turns out it has quite the backstory. On the next Planet Money, the spam labor strike that threatened to tear one small town apart. And on How I Built This, Miguel McKelvey tells us about the rise and fall of the co-working company he helped found, WeWork. That's on the next How I Built This and Planet Money from NPR.
Today at 3 on 93.9 FM and AM 820, WNYC.
Support for WNYC comes from Linguistica 360, offering language learning anytime, anywhere through current events, culture, and more for all levels. New episodes every week at newsandslowfrench.com, newsandslowitalian.com, and newsandslowspanish.com.
Women's history as told by the people who were there.
There were women in positions of power in publishing. It was possible for a woman to say of this book, this is the story of my life, and I'm going to make it a huge book.
I'm Claire Bowes. Join me for a special edition of Witness, Women's History Month, from the BBC World Service.
Tune in Monday night at 8 on 93.9 FM, AM 820, or live stream it at wnyc.org.
Hey, I'm Jad Abumrad.
I'm Robert Krulwich.
This is Radiolab, and this next segment began with a simple question.
Are there limits to human knowledge?
Yes, so we called up Steve Strogatz, mathematician at Cornell University, frequent guest on the show, and we asked him, and his answer sent us on a little adventure.
Yeah, I think there are really important limits on our knowledge that we're all familiar with. What I'm thinking of here is our inability to think about big numbers. When you hear now about the trillions of dollars in the deficit or whatever it is, the debt, that means nothing. How are you supposed to think about that? Now, when you ask why can't we understand the common cold, but we can put a person on the moon, it has to do with large numbers.
Not just large numbers of numbers, says Steve, but large numbers of things interacting.
That there are so many genes involved and so many biochemical reactions involved. Our brains are limited. Our memories are very limited. And so I worry a little bit that we might be approaching the end of our ability to have insight into certain kinds of questions.
What Steve means by the word insight is not like he found the answer. It's like that.
It's like a feeling.
Right.
Like that, oh, I get
the
it.
The feeling you get when you really understand the answer.
Yeah, that satisfying feeling that I can see the reasoning.
I can actually feel it in my bones.
That's a very pleasurable feeling, but one that we may not always be able to enjoy.
I mean, you can see the space. Good luck.
We weren't really quite sure how to feel about this, but then Steve said, yeah, don't take my word for it. Talk to these guys that work down the hall from me. You'll see.
Yeah, we can go right ahead.
Cool. Can you guys introduce yourself? Tell me who I'm talking to.
Yeah, so my name is Hod Lipson.
My name is Michael Schmidt. I'm a PhD student.
And I'm a roboticist.
And Hod and Mike have developed this thing, which does make you wonder if Steve's right. It's a computer.
Yes.
Actually, many.
A whole tower of computers that are all grinding away and performing calculations.
Actually, when you get down to it, it's just a piece of software, but they've named it
Eureka,
because that's what it was designed to do, to have Eureka moments.
Maybe a kind of simpler example.
And the story of Eureka begins pretty simply,
let's think of
with a
regular pendulum, okay?
With a pendulum.
Just one of these things you see hanging off a grandfather clock.
Okay, I've got a regular pendulum swinging in my mind.
Okay, swinging left and right.
Now, says Hod, double it. Instead of a string connected to a ball, make it a string connected to a ball, connected to another string, connected to another ball.
Which is basically like a double pendulum. The cool thing about this is you just put it up, you lift it up and let it go.
And what you'll get, says Mike, is
chaos. This really crazy behavior.
Instead of nice and even, now you got random.
It's almost impossible to actually try to predict where this thing will move.
So what they did was they got a camera, connected it to Eureka, and basically just had Eureka watch this thing, move about crazily. And then they asked the computer a really simple question. Can you make some kind of sense out of this erratic behavior?
Tell me, what about these pendulums over time is not changing?
Because with everything, there's got to be some kind of logic in there. So you're looking for a law, basically. You're looking for the law of the double pendulum.
Yes, that's the idea.
So Eureka is there watching this pendulum.
It was about 3 a.m. in the lab.
And it's basically spitting out all of these different guesses.
It's formulating hypotheses.
It's getting closer. Closer.
And then onto the screen pops this simple formula. F equals ma. What is F equals ma? Is that actually the law that...
F equals ma is Newton's law of motion.
The Isaac Newton.
That's Sir Isaac to you.
It's a basic law of physics.
And one of the greatest discoveries in the history of human thinking.
Took it about a day, 24 hours. But the interesting thing is that it came up with this thing without knowing anything about physics, nothing. That's why we think that this algorithm might be able to find new laws that we don't know about yet.
In fact, once word got out about Eureka,
That's when the emails started.
A couple of emails a day.
From scientists all over the place who were like, hey,
do you mind if we borrow your robot?
For what kinds of stuff?
Anything you can think of, from trying to predict behaviors of cows in a herd to particle physics to the stock market.
And this is when we get to Steve's point about the limits of insight.
That's when they met this guy.
My name is Gurul Soel.
Gurul is a biologist
at the University of Texas Southwestern Medical Center.
He got in touch with Hod.
And he said, I have this amazing data, which is single-cell dynamics.
Meaning he's got this tiny little thing.
It's a simple bacteria.
Really basic.
And he's been collecting this information on how it works.
On its inside.
How things go up and down. Certain nutrients increase, certain nutrients decrease over time, just like a pendulum.
But the thing is, in a cell, it's like thousands of pendulums.
There's so many parts.
Genes turning on and off.
Thousands and thousands, tens of thousands.
Proteins turning on other genes, nutrients going up and down.
It's this crazy quilt of complicated feedback.
And he wanted to know, inside of this cell, how are all of these things related? I mean, we can measure it all. We can see things going up and down and all that.
But what are the rules?
What are the rules? Yeah. And this, he says, is the problem for biology.
Biology is one of the least well understood systems compared to, let's say, chemistry and physics.
They're still lacking the basics.
So we said, look, Mr. Robot, can you tell us what you think are sort of the important principles governing this organism and maybe detect things that were hidden from us?
So he sent us the data, and we analyzed it. And
well, okay, let's not. So what happened?
Suddenly, equations starting popping out.
Almost immediately.
The robot came back to us and said, "Okay, here's a set of 2 equations that describe your data."
Do you remember by any chance what the actual equation was? Not that we'd understand it, but just sort of to hear it said out loud.
Yeah, no, I don't. I don't have my Rain Man skills developed to that degree yet.
The important thing is that the equation was telling him things like, when this protein goes up, this other thing always goes down. And when that thing goes down, this gene turns on and then does a loop-de-loop. And when he went to his cell to check all this out, the equation was right.
These equations match the data. And in fact, they explain new data.
These equations could even predict what the cell was about to do. But hold the champagne, there's just one little problem here. The formulas check out, but
we don't know what they mean.
You don't know what they mean.
Right.
Meaning they don't know why these equations work.
Why when this goes up, does that go down? Why when that goes up, does this go sideways? Why?
I had to first look at this and try to make sense of it. We said like, oh, okay, I think we understand. And we're like, oh, maybe we don't. We think
I didn't develop it
that
myself,
we're close to understanding it.
But now we're in this bizarre situation. We can't even publish it right now because we can't just publish a equation without explaining it.
So in the end, they're in this awkward position where they've got the answer, but they don't have the insight.
And I think it's a preview of what's to come in science.
The more we turn to computers with these big questions, the more they'll give us answers that we just don't understand.
We'll be faced with this challenge of having to find ways to get a computer to explain what it found.
But that will leave us, if this really happens, in some weird position as bystanders where we're sort of listening to the oracle, but not really understanding the answer. Is there going to be a time when we can't cut it anymore? We've had this window in human history when we could not just know things, but actually understand them. That is, you could know why they were true, not just know, but to know why. And that's a beautiful moment in human history, but I feel like it may only be a moment.
Well, I don't really see it quite that sort of sad and dramatic, because at the end, there will be simple principles to describe even the most complicated of processes.
So you have a bias that prevents you from feeling the kind of despair that Steve feels and that we were hoping you would feel.
Oh, well, I have a positive outlook.
Well, I'm just wondering about the we. Look what we have discovered, you'll say when you're an old man with your robot sitting there in a dress next to you. And the robot will be holding your hand, but that will be a cold hand. And Jad and I will be thinking, I don't know, who's the we here?
Well, I would say we is sort of knowledge. I'm just thirsty for understanding and thirsty for knowledge. Me and the cold hand holding my hand, we've accumulated and contributed to the overall understanding of something that we thought maybe 50 years ago wasn't possible. And that would be something that would make me happy.
Hi, this is Steve Strogatz. Radio Lab is produced by Jad Abumrad.
Our staff includes Ellen Horn, Michael Raphael, Soren Wheeler, Lulu Miller, and Pat Walters, with help from Adi Narayan, Tim Howard, and Sharon Shattuck.
Special thanks to Stephen Auerbach. Thank you. Bye-bye.
WNYC is supported by the Met, now on view, Charles Ray Figure Ground, an exhibition of challenging and provocative works from the American sculptor's 50-year career. Learn more at metmuseum.org.
It's WNYC New York. I'm David First. Snap Judgment is coming up next. And later on The Moth, stories include two about New York City. One takes you inside the world of our sanitation department. That's coming up at 2 o'clock this afternoon. Well, it's winter once again. 31 degrees now, snow and sleet shifting to all snow this afternoon. We also have a wind advisory in effect. Could see gusts up to 50 miles per hour. Looks like up to 2 inches of snow falling in New York City, more like 2 to 5 inches north and west of the city.
This is WNYC, FM, HD, and AM New York.
As an artist, blessed with a gift, a light only you possess, you can dedicate yourself. You can struggle. You can sacrifice. You can push yourself and others to finally, at long last, create your one singular, amazing, unified piece of art. And even if you succeed, the world may never know. Today in Snap Judgment, we proudly present Magnum Opus to see if there really is a price to be paid for flying too close to the sun. Snap Judgment, storytelling with a beat right after this break. Stay tuned.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Windsor Johnston. Tensions are escalating at the border between Ukraine and Belarus. Although the Russian military has launched attacks on Ukraine from within Belarus, the country's military itself has not been a major party to the war. Ukrainian officials on Friday accused Russia of staging a false flag attack on its own ally to draw them into the conflict. NPR's Tim Mack has more from western Ukraine.
According to Ukrainian officials, 2 fighter jets took off from Belarus Friday afternoon and entered Ukrainian airspace. They then doubled back and struck a town on the Belarusian side with 3 strikes. Here's the mayor of Rivne, a northwestern city in Ukraine, describing the attack.
Directly on border between Ukraine and Belarus. So this is like a provocation.
Ukrainian officials say that they're concerned that the strikes were meant to goad Belarus into invading the country, opening a new front in the war. Tim Mack, NPR News, Rivne Oblast.
Russia's stock market remains closed. NPR's David Gura reports foreign investors will be watching to see if trading resumes next week.
Russia suspended trading on February 28th, a few days after the country invaded Ukraine. As the United States and its allies implemented wide-ranging sanctions, the value of the Russian ruble cratered and stock prices plummeted. Joe Grunfest, a former SEC commissioner, is a professor of law and business at Stanford.
When a government like Russia shuts its market and keeps the market closed for as long as Russia has, it's a sign of fear.
The closure of the Russian stock market has left many foreign investors unable to sell their holdings. Russian shares are expected to plunge whenever the market reopens. David Gura, NPR News, New York.
A massive winter storm is moving through many parts of the eastern U.S. today. The system is bringing snow and freezing rain with temperatures 20 to 30 degrees below normal. Corinne Boyer of member station WEKU reports that snow has fallen across much of Kentucky.
Usually eastern Kentucky sees a little more than 3 inches of snow on average in March, but overnight the region has received 4 to 8 inches of snow from a winter storm that is still passing through. Meteorologist Haley Stuckey with the National Weather Service says snowfall totals are still coming in.
We started the event off pretty warm, like we had highs in the 60s yesterday. It took
a little while longer for those road temperatures to cool down. Generally, there's less that accumulated on the roads than, say, like grassy or elevated surfaces.
The storm is expected to taper off this evening with temperatures in the teens and wind chills in the single digits. For NPR News, I'm Corinne Boyer in Lexington.
This is NPR.
This is WNYC in New York. I'm David First. The NYPD plans to roll out its neighborhood safety teams on Monday. That's according to Police Commissioner Keechant Sewell, who made the announcement yesterday. The units have been billed as a critical part of Mayor Adams' plan for reducing gun violence across the city. The mayor announced his plan in January, and since then, Sewell says the officers who serve on the units have been retrained.
The officers are being trained in the Constitution, in community interaction, car stops, use of force.
25 teams will be deployed in the precincts with the most gun violence. Critics of the plan have raised concerns about protecting the rights of New Yorkers. New Jersey officials say they plan to expand opioid treatment and addiction prevention programs in the state with a $641 million settlement reached with 4 drug manufacturing companies, including Johnson & Johnson. Tricia Haynes is a former opioid user and now works as a counselor at Behavioral Crossroads in Egg Harbor.
When I came here, I didn't have anything. I lost everything. I hadn't spoken to my children or my family in 6 years.
Haynes says the money will help reunite more families like hers that have struggled with addiction.
My 18-year-old, she's back in my life. The other one isn't ready yet, but she'll come back as long as I keep doing what I'm doing.
The settlement money will be paid through 2038 and will go to help local and state programs. 31 degrees now. We're going to see the temperature continue to drop during the day today down to the low 20s by 5 o'clock. And it's going to be all snow this afternoon. Could see up to 2 inches of snow falling in New York City. And yes, it will be windy. Could see gusts up to 50 miles per hour. It's 106.
Support for NPR comes from the William T. Grant Foundation, working to harness the power of research to make a difference in the lives of children, teens, and young adults for more than 80 years. Learn more at wtgrantfdn.org.
Support for Snap Judgment comes from Progressive Insurance, home of Snapshot, offering a personalized rate on car insurance based on safe driving habits. More at progressive.com or 1-800-PROGRESSIVE. Snapshot is not available in California and North Carolina or from all agents.
Snap Judgment Studios. Okay, Kyoto, Japan. On this day after work, walking downtown, I don't want to go back to my crappy apartment. So I turn into this bar. Subdued lighting, 3 or 4 people, a quiet conversation. It's nice. There's a guy polishing the chrome on the bar, obviously the owner. He glances up, and instead of surprise to see a random black guy walk into his place, he looks at me with relief. Like, finally! Then he doesn't ask me what I want to drink. He asks me what I want to hear. I notice now black and white photographs of people with saxophones and trumpets framed on the walls. I'm in a jazz bar, but I don't know anything about the jazz, and panic, I said the only thing I can think of. Miles Davis? He turns to a side wall, this enormous vinyl record library, pulls some kind of blue album out with the care of a mother, extracts the record from its sleeve, places it on the player, lowers the needle, and smiles. Beatific. Gestures to the other patrons. So what shit and I know. They don't know. He says, Anta, wakaru desu na. But you know. And I feel stupid now because I don't know. But I want to. And I don't even remember ordering anything, but he's pouring me whiskey and says we should probably listen to the best album ever made. What is he cues up Coltrane's A Love Supreme, which I've heard before, but I've never really heard before. I watch as he his eyes in rapture, and I closed my eyes too, listening again for the first time. Then there's Charlie Parker, and Art Tatum, and Count Basie, and Ahmad Jamal, and Charlie Mingus, and Bud Powell, and several bottles later, several albums later, I know I found my new favorite spot. I have to come back here, but I can't come back stupid. Thankfully, Kyoto has the best record stores in the world. Bins and bins of carefully preserved vinyl you can't find anywhere else. If you ask, they will not only play the record for you, but listen with you and tell you who's playing what. It's like I've fallen through a crack in the universe, where all the inhabitants are excited to celebrate a secret African-American history of music and joy and genius and swagger, masterpiece next to masterpiece. Every record, a revelation in vinyl. And at one store, the guy says he has something wild I should hear. And he is right, because it's goofy. It's ridiculous and weird and awesome. An album called Vibes from the Tribe. And don't you know, they recorded it in Detroit City, a piece of my hometown, right here. I run back to the bar, tell the owner I have something special to add to his collection. He drops the record player needle, closes his eyes in delight, and his smile, Yoko Katrina. See, you do understand. Today on Snap Judgment, Magnum Opus. My name is from Washington, and I'm sorry, but Love Supreme really is the best album ever made when you're listening to Snap Judgment. We begin with a story examining the extraordinary life of one singer-songwriter and the attempts to unravel the mystery of his unsolved murder. Subject proudly presents Idolo, the Ballad of Chalino Sanchez. From our friends over at Sonoro and Futuro Media, Eric Galindo has the story.
Episodes of Idolo are presented in both English and Spanish. This is the English version. Si quieres escuchar en español, vuelve al feed y selecciona el título en español. This podcast language, scenes of violence, and drug use that are not suitable for all audiences. Discretion is advised. Episode 1, Death Note. It's May 15th, 1992. A hot, humid night in Culiacan, Sinaloa. And Chalino Sanchez is in a crowded nightclub wearing a suit. Chalino almost always wore some kind of suit, along with cowboy boots, a matching belt, a white tejana like the good guys wore in old American westerns, and, most of the time, a loaded gun. He's with his band, Los Amables del Norte, and they're about to perform in front of a capacity crowd. They're at a place called Salón Bugambilias, a large old-school show hall like the one your sister's quinceañera might have been held at.
Ándale pues. Muchísimas gracias, oiga, por este bonito momento.
It's a momentous night for Chalino. He's about to sing on a big stage in his hometown for the first time in his 7-year career. But Nacho Hernandez, Chalino's band leader, notices that something's off.
Él no estaba tranquilo. Él estaba muy desconfiado. Él traía su pistola. Ahí en el escenario.
Nacho says Chalino's on edge, and he's wearing his gun on stage, which he hadn't done in some time. If you Google Chalino's name, one of the first things that pops up is a clip from this show. The video is a classic 90s home movie A shaky hand pans the camera lens around the packed room. Chalino's standing near the side of the stage. The tuba is popping. There's a man in a black t-shirt pumping his fist, and the crowd is going wild. Chalino finally starts to move, effortlessly, as if gliding on air, escorted by a group of models, all dressed in white. Chalino climbs on stage and nearly crashes into Nacho, who's already tickling the accordion. As the show goes on, the crowd pushes all the way to the edges of the stage, so close to where Chalino is standing that they can reach out and touch him.
La gente bien feliz, nosotros bien contentos.
Nacho says it's a beautiful night. Everyone's happy. And then someone from the audience hands Chalino a note. Nacho says that's the moment everything changed.
Cuando vio la nota se le borró la sonrisa. Era algo feo.
Nacho says the note just wiped the smile off Chalino's face. The moment is captured on video. It takes Chalino 7 seconds to read the whole thing, and when he finishes, his face looks pale. There's what appears to be cold sweat running down his white tejana, and a facial expression I can only describe as an, oh no, please no, face.
Pero él, a nadie nos dijo nada.
But whatever's on the note, Chalino doesn't tell Nacho. He just rolls up the little paper and drops it on the ground. And he gets on with the show. Suddenly, Chalino grabs the mic and turns toward Nacho to tell him one of his favorite sayings.
Yo no canto, yo ladro. Pero a la gente le gusta, dijo.
I don't sing, I bark, but the people like it. He kicks off Alma Enamorada.
Fuimos un equipo súper. Desgraciadamente no nos tocó disfrutar de lo grande que venía para nosotros.
We were a supergroup, Nacho says. Unfortunately, we didn't get to enjoy that superstardom. You can find multiple videos of this concert on YouTube, most of them with millions and millions of views. That's because this show has been analyzed frame by frame by fans all over the world for the last 30 years. This is the last performance Chalino Sanchez will ever play. And that little piece of paper that Chalino reads on stage, it will forever be known as the Death Note. Just hours after this concert, Chalino Sanchez would be murdered. But who killed him and why? For Futuro Studios and Sonoro, in association with Sin Miedo Productions, I'm Eric Galindo and this is Idolo, the Ballad of Chalino Sanchez, a show about the man who would become known as the godfather of narco corridos, whose life would become its own kind of legendary drug ballad.
Chalino Sanchez is widely considered the first narco corrido superstar.
He was a drug trafficker to some extent. He had a collection of guns, and he used to carry a gun often.
He survived the shooting. That was the thing. And he survived it, and he wasn't afraid.
He lived a life without a care, without being scared of anybody or anything. He was a bad guy trying to be a singer.
It's the morning of May 16th, just hours after the biggest show of his life, and Chalino Sanchez is lying in a ditch. At age 31, the self-made music mogul, rumored cartel hitman, acclaimed singer-songwriter, and beloved father of two is dead. And the mystery surrounding his ghastly murder is about to turn this poor immigrant from a tiny Mexican pueblo into the most famous Mexican-American singing outlaw that ever lived. Imagine if Frank Sinatra went on stage every night with a gun in his waistband, or if Tupac got into a shootout on stage at a rodeo. Imagine if Billy the Kid could write his adventures into songs with the skill of Bob Dylan. That's who Chalino Sanchez was. Chalino's legend is so big and brash that it's hard to separate fact from fiction. I'm going to be hosting the English language version of this podcast and reporting on the US side. And Alex Mendoza will be hosting the Spanish version and reporting from Mexico. We're telling Chalino's story on both sides of the border because he died in Sinaloa, but he really mattered to people on both sides. He was born in Sinaloa and moved to California as a young man, escaping the law, possibly after committing a murder. He hustled and spent time in prison. Eventually, he became a singer who pioneered the form that would later evolve into the narco corrido. He spin on traditional Mexican guitar-based songs full of bravado that detail the bloody escapades of Mexico's drug bosses and criminals. But Chalino didn't just sing about cartels, shootouts, and revenge. He lived it. When Chalino died in Mexico in 1992, at 31 years old, it just seemed like the inevitable conclusion of his modern-day Wild West life. The rumors about how it happened started almost immediately. That he had faked his death to escape a hit on his life. That the American or Mexican government had him killed. That he was secretly a hitman for the cartels and finally got his due. Chalino's story, his own narco corrido, is the ultimate ride through the drug cartel world, the underbelly of the Mexican-American music industry, and a murder mystery for the ages. I'll never forget that day in 1992 when Chalino died. News of Chalino's death came with a figurative and literal shock for my older brother Paul, a teenage outlaw in his own right, who idolized him. I remember him coming home that day. He didn't say anything, but he was clearly upset and wanted to play a Chalino Sanchez cassette tape in our jammed family boombox. But Paul forgot to unplug the portable radio. When he tried to dislodge a stuck Gloria Trevi cassette tape with a file-down screwdriver, a small electrical current knocked him back. All the way out for what felt like an eternity. After he recovered, he came into the living room and announced through hard-fought tears, they killed Chalino. As if he had lost someone close to him. I just sat there on the floor of a near-empty room in our little yellow house on House Street, just a few blocks away from where Chalino lived with his wife and 2 children my age. And I wondered who the they that killed him were. I never thought one day I'd be sitting across from Chalino's best friend and band leader, Nacho Hernandez, trying to find answers to that question.
Cada quien a su casa.
Nacho says everyone went their separate ways after that last show in Culiacán.
Yo con mi esposa a mi casa, los otros músicos para su casa, y mi compa se fue con su hermano y con unas muchachas a dar la vuelta.
He says each band member went home. Nacho left with his wife, and Chalino took off in a car with his brother and some women to an after party. Then Nacho tells me a story he heard. And that has basically become one of the biggest legends out there.
Andaba de allá en la glorieta, él lo alcanzó un Subaru, un Nissan de aquí, un Subaru y una Suburban, PGR.
They were in a roundabout when they were ambushed by 3 cars, including a Suburban with government plates.
Bájate. No, le digo, aquí traigo billetes para darles. No, ¿qué billete? Súbete. Se lo llevaron.
A man dressed like a Mexican federale told them, "Get out of the car." Chalino responds, "Hey, I have money," thinking this was just a shakedown for a bribe. The federale responds, No, no money. Get out of the car."
Ya de ahí para adelante, pues, quién sabe qué pasaría.
That's as far as Nacho knows. Chalino's body was found the next day.
Uno, pues, ¿qué va a andar investigando? Porque pues uno no es de pleito, uno es músico.
Nacho says he personally never looked into his best friend's murder because he's just a musician, not a gunslinger or someone with power. Even the people with power, like the police, never really investigated Chalino's death. To this day, the authorities refuse to release the file on Chalino's cold case. But Nacho thinks he has an idea of why Chalino was killed.
El error más grande que cometió mi compa Chalino Sánchez fue ser músico y valiente.
Nacho says Chalino made a fatal error by being a musician who announces shows and tours, telling everyone where he's about to be on any given night, all while moonlighting as an outlaw.
No se puede ser valiente y músico porque te anuncias.
That outlaw vibe is part of what made Chalino resonate with people like my brother, and for many of the people in my community who traditionally feel like the law does nothing to protect them. I mean, most of us grew up much more afraid of the police than of criminals. Someone who is brave enough to break the law to earn a living for their family gets a certain level of respect in my hood. Chalino's narco identity is seductive, for better or worse. And it's also what has contributed to his long-lasting popularity. Even if you've never heard of him, Chalino Sanchez's impact on pop culture and on the music business was astronomical. His fingerprints can be seen on the flamboyant style choices of characters like Los Salamancas in Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, or in the way Luis Guzman's character in Netflix's Narcos rocks a tejana to prove his love of Mexican culture.
Y algo como esto podía hacer tanto billete. Ahora me pregunto si me debería meterle en eso. ¿Qué usted cree?
You can hear Chalino's influence on the thousands of Grammy-winning, Billboard-topping acts that followed in his image and then made it their own, like the late Jenny Rivera.
Yo soy la novia del plebe, de aquel plebe sinaloense.
Fuerza Régida.
Radicamos en South Centro, el negocio la muy fuerte, esa zona controlamos. Polvo blanco manejamos.
And even Snoop Dogg is bumping Chalino to this day.
Friday music from Chalino Sanchez.
You can even feel the seismic, multi-million-dollar shift he caused when he helped turn Los Angeles into an epicenter of the Mexican regional genre. Now, 3 decades after his death, more than 2 million listeners still tune into his Spotify channel each month. His biggest hit, a seminal ode to unrequited love called Las Nieves de Enero, which roughly translates to the snows of January, has been streamed nearly 100 million times on the popular music platform as of June 2021. That's more times than Selena Quintanilla's Bidi Bidi Bom Bom, Bob Dylan's Mr. Tambourine Man, Frank Sinatra's Strangers in the Night, even Biggie's hypnotic party anthem, Get Money. I fell in love with Chalino for the same reason I love Tupac and Biggie, because they were real, and they sang about real. When Chalino sang about being a badass, it wasn't because he was flexing materialistic things. He was talking about surviving against the odds in bad situations. Like in El Gallo de Sinaloa, he talks about a man who is pursued by death and the police, but still manages to get away and live his best life. Then there are songs like Oscar Barraza, about a man who works hard for his family and loves life even though he lost his young son. Chalino's music made people like my friend Raul Robles feel seen.
We were all into Eazy-E, we were into rap, NWA of course, being West Coast, Too Short, Ice Cube, but then Chalino came along and we flipped. Like that was it. Drop everything, Chalino.
Chalino Sanchez was powerful because he was just a regular person, an immigrant who came from poverty, who became a symbol of greatness for people who saw themselves in his story, even though his lifetime was defined by violence. I mean, Chalino was internationally famous, and still, he was killed basically in broad daylight, and his murder was never solved. To my community in LA, Chalino was really like a Tupac or a Biggie. His death mattered to us on that level. And it sparked all these theories, all these legends about who he was, why he died, who killed him, and what was on that death note. And each theory creates branches of Chalino's legend, like
the buzz was that they killed him and for being a big dope dealer.
He died for practicing his art form.
It had something to do with some ladies that he got mixed up with.
Was it a fan? Was it a situation with a family member? Was it the narco culture in the city?
And immediately people start saying that one of the cartels, Sinaloa cartel, had sent a hitman.
Chalino's life is really hard to pin down. There are so many rumors that it's hard to separate fact from fiction. But this season on Idolo, Alex and I will be taking a deep dive into some of the main theories about his death, where they come from, how they are shaped by an intersection of urban legend and real-life events, and also how they fuel Chalino's legacy and help them bridge cultures across generations.
I think it also gave a lot of people, especially Sinaloenses in LA, especially people from small towns in Mexico, this sense of being themselves and being proud of where they were coming from and wearing it proudly.
And we'll tell you how Chalino helped invent the narco corrido, and for better or worse, how he was part of the evolution of narco cultura today.
He was still toward the end of that early quote-unquote glory period where narco corridos were about drugs. They weren't about violence.
We are going to take you on a journey through Chalino's life and across those generations by talking to musicians, writers, and artists who were inspired by Chalino. And hopefully, in that process, we're going to find some answers that untangle the myth from the man.
You know, he's become this like folk figure, this legend.
I'll tell you right now, we never found out what was on that death note, but ultimately, it didn't even matter. Like some character in a narco corrido he might have written, Chalino Sanchez seemed destined to die. And this season on Idolo, we're gonna tell you why. Oh, by the way, hear this theme song? We did something kind of dope. We had a corrido about Chalino Sanchez made for the show. And each episode, there will be a different verse summarizing each theory about his death. Make sure you stay through the end of each episode to hear it. This podcast is written and reported by Eric Galindo, Alejandro Mendoza, and Juan Diego Ramirez. It's edited by Marlon Bishop and Carmen Graterol, with help from Rodrigo Crespo. Editing help this episode from Sofia Paliza Carr. It's produced by Juan Diego Ramirez and Liliana Ruiz, with help from Nicole Rothwell, Evelyn Uribe, and Angelina Mosher Salazar. Executive produced for Sonoro Media by Jasmine Romero and Joshua Weinstein. For Futuro Studios by Marlon Bishop, and for Sin Miedo by Eric Galindo. Sound design and mixing by Manuel Para. Original music by Hector Fernandez with the help of Alex Mendoza, Carmen Graterol, Jasmine Romero, myself, Eric Galindo, and Juan Diego Ramirez. Performed by Simon Temoxle, Javier Zabaleta, Junior Arizmendi, Gerardo Albaran, and Leonardo Cano, aka Quinto Zurdo. Music supervision by Big Sync. Special thanks to Morgan Chappell and the King of Corridos documentary, and Simon Temoxle as Chalino Sanchez. I'm your host, Eric Galindo. Peace out!
thank you so much to our friends at Sonoro and Futuro Studios for sharing Chalino's story with us to discover more about the extraordinary life of the King of Corridos and to unravel the mystery of Chalino Sanchez's death. Listen and subscribe to Idolo, the Ballad of Chalino Sanchez. The show is available on any platform for podcasts. Episode 2 waiting for you right now. And yes, it's available in Spanish and in English. We'll have all things Idolo, the Ballad of Chalino Sanchez, on our website, snapjudgment.org. And when Snap Judgment returns and lost treasure finally found, stay tuned.
This is Michael Hill, host of Morning Edition. I want to say thank you to everyone who donated during the recent pledge drive. It's wonderful that we're able to count on you to support the work we do here every single day. Didn't get around to contributing during the drive? That's okay. It's not too late. Call 888-376-WNYC or go to WNYC.org and click on Donate.
WNYC supporters include Audible Theater, presenting the Public Theater's production of Coal Country, featuring live music from Steve Earle, from Jessica Blank and Eric Jensen, now on stage at the Cherry Lane Theater. Tickets at coalcountrymusical.com.
Women's history as told by the people who were there.
There were women in positions of power in publishing. It was possible for a woman to say of this book, this is the story of my life, and I'm going to make it a huge book.
I'm Claire Bowes. Join me for a special edition of Witness, Women's History Month, from the BBC World Service.
Tune in Monday night at 8 on 93.9 FM, AM 820, or live stream it at wnyc.org.
WNYC, independent journalism in the public interest. 93.9 FM and AM 820, NPR News and the New York Conversation.
Support comes from SelectQuote, reminding listeners they can check a big item off their to-do list and find life insurance that fits their budget. For over 35 years, SelectQuote is where customers can shop multiple life insurance carriers in one place. More at SelectQuote.com. Welcome back to Snap Judgment, the magnum opus episode. Now, send everyone away so you can have some me time. You deserve it. Because for our next story, we sent Snap producer Pat Mesiti-Miller on a quest to my hometown, Detroit City. Snap Judgment.
Meet Jeff. He runs a record store out in Detroit.
I'm Jeff Bubeck from UHF Records. UHF is a 95% vinyl, good old-fashioned record shop. Got soul, R&B, blues, soundtrack, country, classic rock, pop. I've collected my whole life. You know, I started 8 years old collecting records, and now I have, I mean, look around.
Place is covered.
Yeah.
In talking with Jeff, I was asking him where he gets all his records. He told me he hunts them down. He'll buy from collectors, go to estate sales.
You know, I've gone to storage auctions before, long before the Storage Wars and Pickers or any of those shows that are on now. It's nothing like that, really. I mean, for the most part, there's garbage out there.
And then Jeff told me a story about one of his best finds in his decades of collecting. It started off when Jeff got a call from a woman who owned a storage locker. Apparently, somebody was years behind on rent and left behind a unit filled with records. So Jeff went and checked it out.
There was probably 6,000 records in there. Tons of 70s jazz. Really a lot of off-the-wall obscure stuff, you know. There was a little bit of everything in there. Boxes upon boxes stacked up. There was stuff that had gotten wet, you know, stuff that actually had black mold growing on it. I mean, it was just, you know what I mean? It was a mess.
But in looking through all the records, he saw some stuff that was worth investing in and bought them, and then paid to have them stored in the locker for a couple more months.
And one particular day, I went to the storage bin to pick up some boxes, and I noticed a tub in the back of the storage bin. And I opened the tub, and it was just full of cassettes. It was just, mixed tapes, homemade tapes, And then there was some junk mail in there. All of the junk mail had the name Yancey on it. Maureen Yancey, and there were some pieces that said James Yancey. Didn't think twice of it. Another few days had passed, and I have no idea why I did it, but I Googled James Yancey. The first thing that popped up was the Wikipedia page for Jay Dilla, producer extraordinaire.
If you're not up on Jay Dilla, the man is a legend. He was a producer behind tons of classic songs for artists like The Pharcyde, A Tribe Called Quest, De La Soul, Common, Busta Rhymes, Erykah Badu. In hip-hop circles, he's thought of as one of the greatest of all time.
And basically, I just turned to Tommy, my partner, who was sitting next to me, and said, "Get the hell out of here. Do you know who I think this stuff belongs to?" And basically, holy, you know what I mean? Wow. What are we going to do?
In 2006, Dilla passed away from complications from lupus. He was only 32, and since his death, people have been madly searching to find anything and everything Dilla related. So to find Jay's personal record collection, it was huge, because in it would be the records that Dilla had sampled and turned into hits.
The phone started ringing. There were calls. It was like instant backlash. Everyone wanted it, but then they also had a problem with me. What business does he have selling Jay's stuff? You know what I mean? That's what it was. Who the are you?
People were going crazy over Dilla's record collection. But remember how Jeff said that there was a bunch of cassette tapes?
I opened the tub and it was just full of cassettes.
Some of those tapes Dilla had recorded on. They had titles like Beats and Rough Ideas, hinting at unreleased music. A beat tape from Dilla? That's gold. Yeah. Private collectors, fans, people were offering him tens of thousands of dollars to get a piece.
I'm human, and I seen dollar signs for a minute. Even if I didn't take the offer from them, I could have, put a cassette at a time up on eBay and probably made, loads of money.